Well, hello there, sailors and star nuts. This is Captain Garrett, and I am the captain, master, and commander of this Swords and Starships ship that we're on. Welcome to a little Thursday evening live stream. I figured pull up a chair. Let's chat about some things, shall we? It's been kind of a ahoy, Tom. I see Tom in the chat. Squire Tom. Well, there's been some lively little news lately. I'll just preface this by saying, when I saw Ant-Man Quantumania, it was out of pure obligation because I have to do this channel and I wanted to review it. And I even kind of abused my family members to go see it because we had a choice between which movie to see. And I wanted to say, let's go see Avatar because it's a better movie. And I wanted to see it a second time. But in the back of my head, I'm like, but I do need to get Ant-Man out of the way. So when the whole little movie discussion was happening, I said, well, there is this little tale called Ant-Man Quantumania, and perhaps we should see that instead. And so, Boo Man Blue is in the chat. Evening. Welcome in. And so I kind of I pushed him to go see this movie. And I regretted it immediately. I was in the theater. Okay, so this is my thing. This is my litmus test. Because I'm not a fan of every Phase 1 movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But, you know, they're all Shakespeare compared to what we get now in the Phase 1. But I did find... Well, this is my litmus test. Because I don't want to interrupt myself. My litmus test is this. If an action scene is happening and I start to feel like I want... You know, like I can sort of predict, okay... Now the damage bar has to go down on the villain. Okay, now the damage bar has to go down on the hero. That's when I'm checking out. I'm like, I can't do it. Ant-Man Quantumania, the whole movie's like that. I'm like, every single scene, it's like, yeah, okay, I know. They have to go through they have to keep falling and falling and falling so they can get down to the quantum realm. I get it. Can we just get them to the bottom of this thing? So I see this movie and I'm thinking, this has to fail. Like, who enjoys this? But the theater I was in was actually packed. It was I want to say it was the first weekend. Yeah, it was the first weekend it came out. And I was a little disappointed by that. I was like, man, I guess there's just a lot of blue pills still plugged into the Matrix, man. They just still love this stuff, I guess. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this movie's great fun and I'm just being a stick in the mud. But it turns out I've been vindicated. That is to say, we, dear sailors and star nuts, have been vindicated. Try this headline. You know, I feel like we are actually, I think there's blood in the water over at Disney. I think the great Disney is finally starting to bleed. Do you bleed? Yes. That's what Batman said to Superman. Oh, man, technical difficulties. Hang on. I can fix this. Watch me tank my whole OBS overlay here. Okay, there we go. Better? It's better. Disney being very careful with Star Wars movie development. CEO Bob Iger says, Marvel brand not inherently off. But do you need a third or fourth sequel for every character? This article is a study in how these corporate bean counters, they never learn a lesson. And when they do, it's always the wrong lesson. And, a part of me kind of sympathizes with them because I've spent a lot of time in corporate type jobs and I hate it. I absolutely hate it. I hate the political bullshit. I hate playing politics. And that is really kind of, it's not that it's like everyone's bad people. It's just that you kind of, if you offend the wrong person or the wrong thing happens and a little bit of drama, there's a downside, right? So you just sort of have to play games in the corporate world. And you get to see the kind of people that rise in like leadership in the corporate world. And to the extent you're going to rise to the top, more and more of your day is going to be consumed with kind of managing, what's the word for this? Like the aggregate of opinions and feelings around you, kind of presenting an image. You always have to present an image the higher you rise in a corporate ladder. And I could feel this happening to me as I was kind of rising to a very, not a high level, but a very mid level in corporate leadership. And I could see a path to getting higher. And I knew what I'd have to become. I knew what I'd have to become to rise to that level. And I just couldn't do it. I'm like, I'm going to instead build a YouTube channel. That'll work. Pray for me. So this is why I see someone like Bob Iger, and I have a little bit of, I don't know if I would say sympathy, but because he's a very wealthy man who could really give a shit what YouTubers think of anything. But he does fit the mold of a guy at his level. He is an executive. He is not interested in like artistic pursuits. He probably thinks he is because he says, oh, these are all very dear to my heart. And Tom says, pray. What could go wrong? I see that, Fu Man Blue. What could go wrong? Don't say that. I got to knock on wood. Okay. So Disney CEO Bob Iger says the company is still being very careful. See, notice how they have to sanitize all language. You know, it's like they can never speak honestly. A, in a corporate environment, you can never speak honestly. And B, in a corporate environment that also is of an entertainment company putting out a public image to the world, you can definitely never speak honestly. And so they use this safe, sanitized language like, oh, we're being very careful. We're really thinking about things. In an appearance at the Morgan Stanley Technology, Media, and Telecom Conference, Iger was asked an open-ended question about the health of tentpole brands, Lucasfilm, Marvel, and Pixar, along with the main Disney brand. I'm not going to read all the boilerplate there. Basically, let's see, what were the fun bits? Iger says, I think of all of them, meaning the Disney story properties. They're all my babies in a way, he mused. I love how in the regular media, they always write things in this very intellectual way. He mused. I'm like, no. There are 7,000 characters. There are a lot more stories to tell. What we have to look at Marvel is not necessarily the volume of Marvel stories we're telling. You think? You tried volume. You definitely tried volume. But how many times we go back to the well on certain characters? Sequels typically work well for us. Do you need a third or fourth, for instance, or is it time to turn to other characters? Well, you've tried other characters, Bob. You're trying other characters. The problem is you're trying all of the dumb C-list, D-list characters that usually came about in the 2000s, who had books that didn't sell very well. You're trying all those characters, but you know what you're not trying is like, well, this isn't Marvel, but like it's like the DC syndrome. They're trying all these new characters, but you know what they're not trying? Henry Cavill as Superman. They're not trying that. So it's like Marvel's the same thing. You know what you're not trying, Bob? You're not trying Captain America. Steve Rogers is Captain America. You're not trying Iron Man because you killed him. And now you're killing their legacy by allowing, Tony Stark's lifetime achievement that took him his 40 plus years, 45 plus years of life to build this incredible suit of armor and become this hero because of his enormous genius and the legacy of the genius in his family. You've reduced all that to college kid does it in her dorm room because she wants to. So you're not even trying the OG characters and you're destroying their legacy. So, as Fu Man Blue says, yeah, media writers are so pretentious. They really are. They have to write in this very official way and say, yes, the Iger mused. His comments came less than weeks. So, where was I? I interrupted myself too many times. More of what Iger says, right? There's nothing in any way inherently off in terms of the Marvel brand. I think we just have to look at what characters and stories we're mining. And if you look at the trajectory of Marvel in the next 5 years, there will be a lot of newness. Yeah, I think the problem is too much newness, Bob. You're trying... See, what you're doing is you're just stuffing every side character you can find in with the main characters. So you get the point. He's starting... But what the takeaway from this article is that this is corporate speak for... This we can't go on like this, boys. We are losing a lot of money. And so dear viewer, I bring you to this article from Bounding Into Comics. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania declared a bankrupt enterprise. Squire Tom says, Garrett does an impression, take a drink. Oh man, it's making me very self-conscious right now, Tom. I just took a drink for an impression. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania declared a bankrupt enterprise after another huge drop at the box office. And I believe this writer is quoting OMB Reviews. Shout out OMB Reviews. That would be Odin. And he is like the box office surgeon. If Mahler is the story surgeon, Odin is the box office surgeon. And I'm not really much of a numbers guy, so I'm not big into like reading the numbers. But what's really cool... Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. OMB is coming up next in this article, but it was analyst Valiant Renegade declared the film a bankrupt enterprise. So Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania declined 60% in its third weekend from its second weekend. It only grossed $12.8 million domestically. So 60% drop, right? Because when it first came out, you know, I'm in the theater, I see all those people in there, and I'm thinking, maybe I'm wrong about this. But then I came out of the theater, and I'm like, this movie was slop. It was absolute slop. And it wasn't even that it was like markedly bad exactly. It was that it was just stuff. It was just stuff and things. It was like, here's more stuff and things and things and stuff. That's what that movie feels like to me. So I'm like, there's no way this movie's going to make tons of money. And then it was kind of limping along, and I thought, well, maybe it'll do okay. It'll do like Thor: Love and Thunder kind of numbers. But no, 60% drop in its third weekend. It's almost getting beaten by the Coked Up Bear. Coked Up Bear has it beat. It's only grossed $188 million total domestically, $232 million internationally, for about $420 million total. Analyzing these numbers, YouTuber Valiant Renegade said, even after a full 3 weekends in release, it is unlikely that Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania is even going to breach $400 million at this point. He added, this movie's done, folks. I think $500 million is almost entirely off the table, and this movie may conclude its box office run both here in the US and abroad, maybe somewhere around $450 million, and that is a big loss for the Walt Disney Company. That is blood in the water. He went on to explain, that means that at this point, effectively any and every dollar that they spent on the marketing campaign for this film, above and beyond the $200 million that they spent to produce it, has all burned up in flames. And that figure, as we continue to remind folks for these Marvel movies, a $100 million take, I guess is what he's saying, is a very low floor. It's at least that much, but more likely it's probably closer to $125 million, if not even slightly higher. Marvel and Disney spend a lot of money on these things. They need to get the word, I think he means they need to get the word out, because they need not only the films to do well, but they need merchandise sales to pick up. And that is not going to... Look at this poster. I'll make sure I'm getting the right... Yeah, it's looking good in the OBS. Cool. This is the dumbest character they've ever created in the MCU. Like, bar none. Can you even... Corey Stoll. Has anyone seen House of Cards? You know? It's been a while. Frank Underwood. Did you think I forgot about you? That's pretty terrible. It's been a while since I saw that. I can't do his accent. Anyway, this is the actor Corey Stoll who played the senator that he grooms for power and then screws up his life, and he pushes him back into alcoholism, and he like encourages him to delete himself. This is Corey Stoll. This is that actor. They've stretched his face into this bizarre creature. Oh, what do you think of this guy, chat? Tom says drink. Drink, chat. Drink for me. Yeah. It's not just that MODOK looks stupid. It's that, okay, I've seen the comic book character. right? That this film character is based on. And the comic book MODOK is generally a pretty silly looking character. I mean, this is the thing. I back in the day when Guardians of the Galaxy was first coming out, I didn't want to see it because it looked dopey. It was like there's a talking tree in it. Like, what the hell is that? Everything's a big dumb joke. There's a talking raccoon. Like, this isn't a Marvel movie. I was thinking when I saw the trailer, I was like, no, this is a Pixar movie or something else. But this does not belong in the MCU. And I remember hating the idea of Guardians of the Galaxy. But then I saw it, and it actually turned out to be a movie with real heart, and there were good characters, and the comedy was not making fun of the characters. It was just kind of part of their personality. Like, Star-Lord is kind of a little bit of a screw-up, but a well-meaning and ultimately victorious. You know, he's kind of a fool triumphant is what Star-Lord is. So it won me over, and I loved it, and it was a great movie. So it's not that you can't have a ridiculous-looking character that earns your investment as an audience member. Groot and Rocket Raccoon are absolute proof of that, because I never would have believed I would have wound up loving those characters, but I did. So that's not the problem here, is that he looks stupid, although stretching his face is, you know, not the best choice. Like, just make him more like the tree, Groot. Make him more like Groot. Make him distinctly not human. That would have been a better choice, I think. But it's the fact that his character is stupid. He's played as a joke. He's meant to be a threat to the characters, but he's never a threat in the film. And literally his entire plot arc reduces to he just enjoys being MODOK until someone tells him to stop being a dick. And then he says, okay, I'll stop being a dick. And then he becomes part of the heroes. I just can't even. So Fu Man Blue says, is that the villain from Ant-Man? The actor, I mean. Was he in Ant-Man 1? Yes, Corey Stoll. He played Yellow Jacket in the first Ant-Man. And by the way, I hated that character in the first Ant-Man. He was a boring, one-dimensional villain. He didn't really have any depth to him. I thought the original Ant-Man film was mid. It was one of the was that phase 1 or 2? I want to say that was phase 2. That was one of the films I was not fond of. There's one thing I liked about it. I liked Hank Pym. Well, two things I like. I liked Hank Pym, and I liked the idea of a kind of thief screw-up sort of being recruited for a heist using this Ant-Man technology. And I thought that was clever, and that was what made the film redeemable for me. Plus, there was the nice little, heartfelt plot arc about how, he's trying to earn back the respect of his daughter because he's been in jail. Like, that was all really good. And what the problem we have now is that everything is multiverses and timelines and quantum realms and multiple Kangs. And it's like, this is nonsense. They have turned this entire fantasy. I mean, it's not even fantasy at this point. It's flat out nonsense. It's unreal. It's abstract. There's no discernible story. Polo Surf, welcome in. Hi, Polo Surf. Wiping that dude off the bathroom floor. Yeah, so Fu Man Blue points out that in the first film, what was his name? Darren Cross. Yeah, Darren Cross. What a waste of a good character name that is, because that could be like a cool detective in a crime novel. Darren Cross. So he has a malfunctioning. He's trying to replicate Hank Pym's shrinking technology, the Yellow Jacket, the villain in the first film, and he's failing at it. And so he uses the malfunctioning technology deliberately to shrink a guy into a little blob of goo, and he wipes him off the bathroom floor. It was gross. It was actually really gross. That was weird. But what's funny too is do you notice that the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they can't really have even violence at that level anymore? These characters used to be kind of violent. There used to be dangerous things that would happen. And that actually is a great connector to my point, is that Darren Cross in the first film, dumb as the character is, he was lethal and he was a threat. He was a threat. And at least in his madness, he was a violent guy. And so now you have MODOK, who I forget what the stupid acronym stands for, but it's okay, what is let me get the... MODOK acronym. Acronym for mental, mobile, mechanized organism designed only for killing. And I think they kept that in the movie. I can't remember if the movie keeps that, and I don't care. But essentially, so he's supposed to be the ultimate weapon, and yet there's almost all the violence is sanitized, if it even exists in Quantumania and in all these Marvel movies now. And the bad guys can't truly be bad anymore. There's this weird trope where they all have to be converted at the end. It's like freaking weird. So, yeah. From House of Cards to this. Good Lord. Bad career choice, sir. Where was I? So, the point is, this movie is failing. And actually, OMB Reviews did weigh in here. Yeah. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania's box office grosses after the film's third weekend. The film saw a 70% drop week 1 to week 2. 2 to 3, it saw a 61% drop. This film is dropping like a light. Is that what he said? I don't know. So there's actually a decent chance for this film to, again, barely cross 475 million, let alone get to 500 million. I still think it's possible because it is a Disney film. This is OMB Reviews speaking. It is a Marvel film, and the Marvel fans are still cult-like enough to be able to show up for movies like this. So at least get it to that. Well, I don't know. So this may be the first one of these major tentpole Marvel films that is actually going to fail. Because like Thor: Love and Thunder and Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness were even worse. Well, I didn't see Love and Thunder. I saw all the reviews, and I was not interested. And that was pre-Swords and Starships launch, so I did not go see it. But I did see Doctor Strange Mom, and in terms of actual plot structure and writing, that film is way worse than Quantumania. It's like it's much more of a mess. But it did well. It did well enough. It eked out a profit. Ant-Man Quantumania, I think the jig is up, folks. I think the jig is up. I think the blue pills are starting to wake up from the Matrix and realize that, oh, this isn't just once in a while. Every single one of these is going to be like this. Every single one of these is going to be like this. There are no more, like, stop hoping, because it's not going to change. And Iger's dumb political speak is proof of that, because this is what Iger thinks, right? He says, what's going wrong with these things? Oh, well, do we really need 3 or 4 sequels? Dude, Endgame was the 4th sequel to Avengers. It was part of, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was like 22 interconnected films. Your problem is not sequels. Your problem is the guy who wrote Quantumania. Do you want to see his IMDb page? Check out my video on Mr. Jeff Loveness, because I had a real bone to pick with this guy. Okay. These are the people they hire to write, look, sure, he's a nice guy. Nothing against him personally, but professional to professional, or very small professional to very apparently wealthy professional. I have feedback for this guy. Your film was crap, sir. It was crap. But it's not entirely your fault, because let's see what Jeff Loveness is known for. Are you ready for this? Prepare yourself for a... Loveness is known for Jimmy Kimmel Live, 2003, The Office, 2005, and he was a main writer on the Oscars, 2017. This is who they hire to write a major $200 million film. This is what he's known for. This is it. This is the whole thing. That's the whole bowl of wax right there. What do you think of that? And guess what? He's writing the next Avengers movie. This guy is writing the Avengers movie. Well, I think the problem is there's too many sequels. Do we need a 4? No, you need to stop hiring fucking Jimmy Kimmel writers to write your shit. That's what you need to stop doing. Have you seen Jimmy Kimmel lately? He's not funny. The guy's not funny anymore. Oh man. I see I see Santiago in the chat. I am buckled up. Polo Surf, a rude awakening. Yes, this is definitely a rude awakening. I don't think they've woken up to it. I mean, they're starting to. They just can't admit it, you know, that you can never admit. I'm seriously going through. Okay, so he's got Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. It doesn't say. Oh yeah, upcoming. There we go. I hate how IMDb. Yeah, the Kang Dynasty. Why? You know why? Because it's not actually writers that are writing any of this crap anymore. It's an algorithm. It's a committee. It's the, you know, they walk over to the HR department and they get the woke download, the SJW wish list, and they say, okay. And then they walk over to the accounting department and they say, how many billions will this one bring in? Oh, this will bring us in at least one plus 0.1 billions. And they're like, okay. And then they say, so go ahead and spend 200 million on it, and go ahead and spend another 200 million on marketing. How many people of color do we have to erase from the poster so China will show it? We just have to, well, this one, they're not going to make us erase them. We just have to shrink them on this poster and then they'll run it. Okay, cool. And then they walk over to the writer's room and they count up all the different identity groups that they have in the room. And then when the movie's pretty much halfway ready, that's when they say, okay, go find me a guy that we can say is the writer. And that's Mr. Jeff Loveness. So I have some sympathy for his situation. He did write for Rick and Morty. He wrote for The Miracle Workers. Oh, that's interesting. That's what the hell is that? Stock. Okay, that's a short film. You know what? They're hot. Imagine this. I remember being in college almost 20 years ago now, and being in film classes and thinking, man, it would take a long time to get the credentials necessary to get hired as a writer in Hollywood. Man, that's gonna, it'll take years of work, and I'll have to be on several successful things before I ever get anything big. You know, it's like if you're imagining your trajectory, right, as a writer, it's like I could never have imagined a future in which a guy who writes frickin' for the Oscar, he writes for the Oscars show, and is like, oh, here, go ahead and write this $200 million movie. You know what he is? He's a fall guy. If you're hired as a writer in the MCU, you are a fall guy. That's your purpose. You are there to take the blame when the committee and the HR and the SJW wish list turn out to produce a crap movie. That's what you're there for. So that's Mr. Jeff Loveness. But then he goes and he whines to Variety about how I don't understand why people don't like it. I thought MODOK was cool. And it's like, by the way, I notice I use the word like a lot as a crutch. So chat, you can correct me on that. You can meme me on that. I mean, obviously, you can meme me on anything. There's nothing I can do about that. This is the internet. Let's see. I might be getting behind on the chat. So Polo Surf says, therefore, no incompetent... Wait, okay, I got to get your first comment. Fu Man Blue, yeah, Iron Man killed a lot of baddies in the first film. You know what? When Iron Man 1, when that little thing comes out of his shoulder, he's actually, they imply he's fighting essentially Taliban. He's basically fighting Taliban, but they call them a different group. They're the Nine Rings, you know, and he shows up, and I'm thinking, and it was really not because of like Hollywood. It was more just, I felt it was a trope that superheroes don't kill. That was just what I thought, because this is back in kind of the early days of where these films were first getting started. And I figured they'll never have a superhero kill anyone, right? Because Spider-Man never does, which is good, because Spider-Man, that's his deal. Batman, same deal. But then Tony Stark raises up the hell would you call that? It's like a little bullet. Little autocannon, I guess you would call it. It's like an autocannon, goes zzz, brrr, just like takes out headshots, all of them. I was like, my eyes popped out of my head when I'm watching this, and I was like, holy shit, a superhero just killed bad guys. I'm gonna need time to process this. So yeah, totally with you on that, Fu Man Blue. Like, and they can't have that anymore. Now And these nanosuits, I hate these nanosuits. That's the worst thing ever. First of all, it's visually lazy, and it's an excuse for them never to wear their masks. That's why they do it. Hat tip to Gary in Nerdrotic. He pretty much nailed that. Polosurf says, I think they can work the PG-13 wonderfully to the point where the movie could be just as brutal as any R-rated action movie. We need one great, barely PG-13 ultra-violent movie to set the record straight. Therefore, no incompetent, tame filmmakers get a hold of those R-rated novelty reboots and then go on to flop and get a bad precedent for studio executives. Yeah, it's, you really fail upward in Hollywood, and that's the problem. It's like the more failure you heap upon a franchise, the more they just promote you to the next big film. It's like, why is this guy in Avengers? I'm not going to predict this because, I just feel like it goes against the grain to ever show anything that admits that you made a mistake in especially Disney, but just in entertainment. So I don't think that they will fire Mr. Jeff Loveness, but they should. But if it did happen, we're not to John Wick yet. If it did happen, I wouldn't be surprised. Polosurf says, God damn, you're right. They're Fall Guys. They're Fall Guys. It's a setup. Don't do it. Don't take the job. Fu Man Blue says, the diversity filter that all scripts have to go through, now it seems like the writers should never be criticized for bad work. Yeah, I mean, one theory goes that the reason that Hollywood really loves this diversity stuff is because it's a shield. Because anytime they're criticized, they can deflect. And I do think there's truth to that. The problem is I also think they're believers, so to them, it's just the way the world is. I mean, I lived in Los Angeles for 6 years, and I mean, if you've ever lived in a place like Los Angeles or San Francisco or New York, everyone you meet, every single one is like, at least the ones that are open about what it's just, everything that the most far leftist of a leftist thinks about everything is just considered normal and reality. And it is shocking to them when they meet anyone that conflicts with that. It's just like, I remember one time, someone found out I had not voted for a certain president in 2012 and were shocked. They're just like, what did your parents do to you? And it's like, do you realize that there's other places in the world where people don't think like you? It's just a weird thing. It's like, so to them, this is all just normal. It's just reality. That's why I like living in places where I'm serious about this. I like living in places where there's a diversity of views and thoughts. I don't find life interesting in an echo chamber. I truly don't. It bores me. So, when I moved to other places in the country, like Arizona, Florida, places like that, I found that it was so refreshing because people would ask me who I voted for if they didn't know. They'd just be like, who did you vote for? What do you think about this? And I'm like, that doesn't happen in Los Angeles. If you live in Los Angeles, it is assumed you voted for Obama both times, and otherwise you're a monster. Like, it's just that simple. You are a monster if you did not. And so people usually, if you're nice, if you're kind of a likable person, as of course your good captain is, of course, a very likable person, they literally can't compute sometimes when they find out that you don't agree with them politically, because they're like, but you're such a nice person. I don't understand. But how can you be a monster? This doesn't make any sense. Like, everyone knows that anyone that doesn't vote, anyway, you get my point. I enjoy living in places where people do not make those assumptions because it means there's a healthy level of debate and exchange of ideas, because let's face it, every human being is wrong about something. So if we all live in an environment where every single belief we have is constantly reaffirmed all the time, that is a recipe to become a raging narcissistic asshole. There's no doubt about that. So, interestingly enough, it's kind of one of the reasons that I never spent a lot of time in like political clubs in college and stuff, because like I spent a little bit of time, hanging out with like-minded people in, I was in college during the 2004 election, Kerry versus Bush. There was a lot of tribalism going on there. But I'd get bored with it. I'd be like, I'm kind of bored talking to all these people that always agree with me. I mean, it's fun. You need it. But, anyway. So that's it. Like, there's blood in the water here. And that just brings me to, on the subject of learning all the wrong lessons. If you have not seen the Netflix Daredevil show, it is one of the greatest. So my number one show on Netflix is Stranger Things. I think that is the greatest thing Netflix has ever achieved. And as it's turning out, that's turning out to be a pretty short list because they haven't really achieved a whole heck of a lot. Everything else Netflix has ever had of value turned out to be someone else's property that they've now lost. But the second greatest thing that Netflix ever produced, in my opinion, is that Daredevil show. I was not like, I'm not the biggest comic book reader because I came late to comic book, so I'm not making any claims to like deep comic book knowledge. But I love the characters, and I did used to read Spider-Man, and one of my favorite things was when Daredevil would cross over into Spider-Man, and I loved those two characters teamed up because they had such a great complementary power set, and I was a big fan of that animated. It was the Spider-Man animated show in the 90s. That had the kind of CGI web slinging shots, That was back when that kind of technology was new. And there was a great episode where Daredevil shows up. Spider-Man is being falsely accused by J. Jonah Jameson of, crimes, and he hires Matt Murdock as his lawyer. And then, of course, the little secret is that Matt Murdock is also Daredevil, and Spider-Man doesn't know it, and they wind up teaming up, but then Daredevil's able to figure out that Spider-Man is Peter Parker by hearing his heartbeat. There was cool stuff like that. I loved that. And that made me like the character of Daredevil because I thought, what a cool idea for a superpower. It's like he's blind, but all of his other senses, touch, taste, smell, and hearing, have all been super enhanced. And so he has this sort of superhuman ability to like move and see things and hear things without sight. And I thought that is a really cool idea. And that show on Netflix captured him beautifully, not just his abilities and his backstory, but like the whole thread about his father being a boxer and in Hell's Kitchen. The whole thing about how he was a Catholic and he had his faith, but it was something he wrestled with. And there's even that great moment when he's explaining how he sees the world, right? And it was actually Karen, who was asking him in the show. She's like, "What is it?" Or was it Karen or was it Rose? It's been a while since I saw it. I've been meaning to rewatch it. Rosario Dawson's character, I think maybe was asking him this, but she's like, "How do you actually see?" And he said, "Well, I hear some things, I smell some things, and I sort of put it all together into a kind of impressionistic painting." And she's like, "Wow, that sounds like," I forget what her response was, but he says, "It's sort of like the world is on fire." And then for the only time in the whole show, they go into they show his actual visualization of like how he sees her. And it's kind of like she's in flames because he's kind of putting together all the different sensory data. And of course, the devil on fire. I mean, it was fucking awesome. It was great. I was like, that is so cool. That's a clever way to use lore to serve the story, right? I tell you that to tell you this. They then introduced John Bernthal, who is like one of my favorite actors. I don't know that he's actually a talented actor. He's just one of my favorites. But I think he's talented at doing John Bernthal things. I think whatever kind of things that John Bernthal is good at, which is pretty much one kind of thing, which is, I guess, just kind of being a badass, he's good at that. And he actually turned out to be the perfect casting for this character. And he was great in season 2 of Daredevil. The Punisher versus Daredevil was fantastic because it wasn't just a physical contest, it was also a philosophical contest because Daredevil has a very specific belief about justice, and the Punisher has a very different belief about justice, and that was fun. They had that great dialogue on the roof where the Punisher's like, "You're just a half measure. I'm the full measure." I'm like, badass. So good news, Marvel fans. They're bringing him back. They're going to put him on Disney Plus. Marvel Studios, try this headline. Marvel Studios to bring back Jon Bernthal as the Punisher in Daredevil Born Again seemingly drops both Eldon Henson and Deborah Ann Wall from the franchise. So they're dropping Foggy and they're dropping Karen. Apparently. They're not on the casting roll call. And so what we're going to get, a look at this shot right here. This is from the show. This is from the Netflix Daredevil show. You think you're going to see this on Disney Plus, my friends? No, you're not going to see this. This scene, by the way, is epic beyond belief. It is one of the coolest freaking martial arts scenes. It is freaking... They basically set him up. I don't want to... I mean, I guess I'm going to spoil it. They set him up to be murdered in prison. And it's basically, it's a done deal. Like, there's no way anyone could survive this. And and you're seeing the results. You're seeing the results. And trust me, if you haven't seen that scene in a while, go watch it. It's fantastic. You aren't going to see that on Disney Plus. It's not possible. You're not even going to see blood. Will you see blood? You're not going to see blood on Disney Plus. Squire Tom puts out a heart emoji for Foggy Bear. A heart emoji for Foggy Bear. Fu Man Blue says, Daredevil is some of the best television ever. And he also, Fu Man Blue says, being blind was about the best cover ever for a superhero. Really it is, because it's part of his secret identity, right? He couldn't possibly be a superhero. Like, that's the best, most solid secret identity of all time right there, because there's no way you could be like, oh, you never see Matt Murdock and Daredevil in the same place at the same time. It's like, the guy's blind. Come on. Get real. But also, this is an important point, because now there's this weird movement that the wokesters are, they're on a rampage lately about disabilities. We've got to shoehorn disabilities into the storyline. And here's the interesting thing. I remember reading years ago about how when Stan Lee first floated the idea for a blind superhero, he got a lot of pushback, as he often did when he floated ideas for characters. He got pushback on a guy with powers like a spider, because nobody likes spiders. And he had to defend his character. And he was like, no, I think this will work. They're like, who wants a blind superhero? And he said, no, it'll be part of his character. It's part of his powers. And one of the things that Stan Lee was concerned about was that it might offend blind people. He was worried about that, because he thought, will it be insulting to blind people if they see this character who can do all these fantastical things, but he's blind? Will it be like I'm kind of making fun of it? And he was worried about it, but he hoped it would go over well. And it actually had the opposite effect. Like, he got all kinds of letters from people who were, just had different, I guess, I don't remember if it was specifically blind people, but I think he did, because there were, I guess, I don't know how they read it. I'd have to look back I don't recall now from when I read years ago, but I just remember there were a lot of people with various disabilities that wrote to Stan Lee about how amazing that character was and how they loved it. They just loved seeing him and how inspiring he was. And here's the thing, right? Stan Lee did not set out to say, well, I need a disabled character today to save lives and empower disabled people. Who would be a character I should give a disability to? Like, that would have resulted in a garbage story. What Stan Lee did is he set out to write a good character. He was like, what would be an interesting hero with some interesting powers? What would be... And the beauty of what Stan Lee did is that he gave him and Jack Kirby, they gave balance to their characters, because they had advantages and they had disadvantages and they had flaws. And so Spider-Man's flaw is that he's broke and he never has enough money for anything, and he's constantly juggling all of his life problems with trying to be a hero, And so he set out to create a character with nuance and subtlety and complexity, which he did, and it just so happened that part of that nuance and complexity was that this character was blind, and that actually fed into the powers that he had. And as a result of that, a great story emerges, and that great story featuring a character that suffers from this disability resulted in people being inspired and loving the character. That's why woke storytelling is so crap, because they don't start with a good story. They don't allow the story to earn its place. They start with, well, I mean, it's just propaganda. It's like we need the truth that people believe to be X, and therefore we will use whatever vehicle we need to make it X. I don't think they always consciously think of it that way, but unconsciously that's what's at work, right? And so Professor X, another good one. Yeah, character. See, now this is the other thing too. Why is it so interesting that Professor X is bound to a wheelchair? Hat tip Santiago for putting that in the chat. Why is it that this character is so interesting? Because his mind is his power. His mind is his mobility, right? And the fact that he's also disabled makes him more interesting, because it's a dichotomy. It's like, it's a paradox. He's this extremely powerful being, yet also is extremely limited in this physical way. That's great storytelling, because it's reflective of life, you know? There's a trade-off to everything. And so that's what elevates the character, is that he is overcoming his disability. He is doing something important, and I don't mean his superpower. I mean what he does. He runs this school to help people. He runs this school to help teenagers who have nowhere else to go, and they have these extraordinary powers they could easily use for evil. And so Professor X takes it upon himself to give these young people a place to learn, and to actually learn to be ethical and to use their powers for good. That's a great story. Fu Man Blue says, yeah, their disability wasn't at the core of the character the way it is today. Paraplegic Spider-Man, for example. Yes. What is that? Is that Webweaver? No, that's a different one. Yeah, like MODOK, LOL. Yeah, MODOK sucks. So these two characters, Karen and Foggy, which are core characters. So Daredevil's coming back in Marvel, and they've already ruined him in She-Hulk. They made his character a big dumb joke, just like they do with everything. They are just running every single freaking character through the Marvel Cinematic Universe algorithmic wood chipper is what they're doing. They're just feeding them through the wood chipper so that you get the mulch on the other side. They are mulching. They're mulching it down so that, what they believe to be their audience that wants to see this are chewing down on that mulch. Oh, yes, give us more slop, Disney. But see, they're wrong about this, though, because they think it was all the jokes in Guardians of the Galaxy that made that a good movie. And they're wrong about that. It wasn't the jokes that made Guardian. It was the fact that the jokes were a rational part of that story, because that story itself was built around the ideas of certain personality traits. It was an ensemble cast that were at odds with each other for different reasons. Like, Drax is the character that takes everything seriously and literally, which was funny because he's right next to a sarcastic raccoon. And so that creates their natural foils to each other. But there was a serious story at the core of that. And that's what won me over. Yeah. You excited for this? Excited for this is oh, yeah. How it started, how it's going. Wow. There's a reason they never put Batman in the daylight. You ever think about that? It's like, if there's certain characters, you put them in the day. When do you look at this? Tell me this looks like someone cosplayed Daredevil using, what would you call it? The, essentially what like highway construction workers, that are like giving you the slow or stop sign They take their kind of like, I'm drawing a blank what you would call that, but basically what you would wear in that environment. It's like they used those materials to make his costume. This looks so fake. This looks like something you could get at Party City. What were they? I think they've literally underpaid and abused their workers to the point where like they've chased all the talent out of Disney. They have exhausted and depleted all of their good, talented people because number one, the woke Stalinistic purge, must continue, which is anyone who who bucks the system has to, who does not agree with the message has to be gotten rid of. And then they have underpaid and overworked all of their people, and then they go and let Taika Waititi go out and make fun of them for clicks, right? Because they want to make, it's a self-inflicted wound. So I have no sympathy for you, Bob. I really don't. There's blood in the water. Let's talk about what I'm excited about. John Wick 4. I got a feeling about this one. So I was watching Film Threat. I was watching the Hollywood on the Rocks live stream on yesterday. And Chris, Gore, and Alan Ng gave their reaction to no spoilers. That's what I like about them. I'm a big oh God, I shouldn't say that. Then the chat's going to have spoilers in it. Forget it. Anyway, I hate spoilers, but so I try to avoid them. And they don't do spoilers. They do reactions. They wait till the movies actually come out to actually start getting into spoilers. And I appreciate that. And they basically said this movie is like you have never seen John Wick action like this before. Chris Gore said it's like his second favorite after the first one. He's like, it's 3 hours long, and he couldn't even find a time where he could, do a bathroom break because he's like, it was riveting. It was like every single action scene led into another one. And what I find interesting about his opinion on this is he also felt that the action scenes in John Wick 3 were a little bit bloated. There were too many of them, and they got a little bit obnoxious after a while. But he's like, with 4, it's a different story. Like he said, wait until you see the end. Wait till you see the finale. And I'm like, oh man, I'm getting kind of chills thinking about it because and so here's what I'm predicting. I'm not in the prediction business, but I will make an exception. The captain will predict. I will predict this film. I think it's going to be another Top Gun Maverick. Man, maybe that's too ambitious. I don't know. Top Gun Maverick is kind of an anomaly, but I'm serious about this because there is a dearth of like good movies, and I feel. And this is the other thing. Alan Ng and Chris are like, there's no wokeness in this movie at all. This movie is just a straight up action movie. It is there to entertain you, and it's very much more in the vein of the first one than the second or third one. It's kind of dialed back the lore craziness just a skosh. That's also encouraging because that is my only real critique with the John Wick franchise. I'm kind of more of a fan of this than even I'm a super fan of John Wick. And the only real thing that bugged me about it was that the lore was getting so crazy that I was starting to feel like, well, this is pretty much a fantasy world at this point. And it kind of started out as like a cool, a little bit outlandish, but a hitman underworld. And that was cool. I liked the hitman underworld. When it turned into this kind of fantasy, there's the high table and there's the freaking guys in the deserts with the tent. I'm like, okay, well now it's turning into a fantasy novel. So a little bit of small critique. I still enjoy it. So I like that it's hewing closer to the first film. And I think that what John Wick does is what Disney does not do. It is what the Marvel Cinematic Universe does not do. It's what DC does not do. It builds on success. And so what I think is going to happen is it's going to have a pretty good opening because as you see here in the headline, Sailors and Star Nuts, John Wick Chapter 4 loading up franchise record opening between 60 million and 70 million. This from Deadline. Let me check the chat real quick before I dig into this. Polosurf says the Daredevil showrunners should exploit Disney's budget and make the best season. Of course, definitely. Do you think they can, though? I feel like their hands are tied. Do you realize the paperwork it must take to write anything at like Disney? Do you realize probably the diversity and equity and inclusion reviews all your scripts have to go through? Like, they have no power to do that. Polosurf says, I love that it's 3 hours long. See, and Chris Gore is very critical of 2 hour plus runtimes because he says, films should be disciplined. And I agree. As a writer myself, you must be disciplined in your approach to whatever medium you're working in. And in the film medium, 2 hours is a reasonable. You should try to keep your film to 2 hours and only go beyond that if there's a really good reason for it and it's really earning that runtime. And according to Gore, it is earning that runtime. So I'm excited about that too, Fu Man Blue. What else? Maverick setting the record low. John Wick 5 has to be a modern classic. There's no other way. You think so? I'd like to think so. I got a feeling, man. There's like, I think this movie's got an electricity to it. You know what it reminds me of? It kind of reminds me also of how the Mission Impossible films, which I'm a huge fan of the Tom Cruise Mission Impossible franchise. I just freaking as if there's another one. I mean, there was the show back in the day, but I just love that like those films have built on their success because, the first Mission Impossible film is garbage. I literally tried to watch it just for the heck of it recently, and I still can't stand that movie. I can't make heads or tails of what's happening in it. Yes, I roughly understand the plot. That's not my point. It's so convoluted and dark and depressing. There's something about that movie. I hate it. It's not even just a good spy thriller. It's not even there's better spy thrillers than Mission Impossible 1. And it was kind of trying to be a spy thriller, but it also was trying to be a spy action movie, and it was failing at both. So that's why I hate the first Mission Impossible film. Second one, everybody else hates Mission Impossible 2. I love Mission Impossible 2. I will watch Mission Impossible 2 any day. Couple of reasons. Doug Ray Scott is epic as the villain. Yes, I know. He's over the top. It's the face-off of Mission Impossible movies. But you know what I love? I love how all the films call back to it. They call back to the lore in Mission Impossible 2, which is a subtle recognition that it exists in the canon, and I appreciate that. Actually, they reference the first film as part of the canon too, so I love Mission Impossible 2. It just had the John Woo style. It had a great villain. They're just great. It's a nemesis movie, really, is what it is, and I loved that. But then the third one, I actually think is the weakest, second weakest. The first one I don't even really consider part of it because I just can't even stand it. But the third one is maybe the weakest because it had kind of a weak ending, but it was still pretty good. And that was the J.J. Abrams one. And that's probably why it was one of the weaker ones, actually. But then they come out with Ghost Protocol and Rogue Nation, and those films just kind of started really turning it up a notch. Mission Impossible Fallout, unbelievable. Unbelievably good. That is one of the best films, action films I've ever seen. It's got to be in my top 10. I absolutely love it. And you notice how these films just keep getting bigger. They just keep gathering energy. And you notice how the Disney films, they are energy drainers. They drain your energy to watch them. They lose energy as soon as they're released. They're like a fruit fly. They die the minute they're born. So yeah, I've got a feeling about John Wick. It's got that electricity that the Mission Impossible franchise has because it's earning its keep. And what I suspect is going to happen is it's going to have a good opening. So it's going to have this it has a robust projection between $60 million and $70 million in what would represent the highest opening stateside for the Keanu Reeves R-rated franchise. It's R-rated too. Don't you just love that? It's another solid opening in what is a back-to-back tentpole program spring. The anticipated opening for Chapter 4 would also represent... Why did they say rep in this article? Why did they abbreviate it? Is that one of these access media, like you have to be... This is how you're too cool for school? I don't know. That anticipated opening for Chapter 4 would also represent the biggest opening for Lionsgate since the pandemic. The studio had a nice win last weekend with the faith-based title Jesus Revolution, which opened at $15.8 million. By the way, was kind of almost threatening Ant-Man, if you can believe that. It makes me kind of want to see it. I want to see Jesus Revolution. I need to get saved. The last movie, John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum, opened to 56.8 million and was finaled at 171 million domestic, 328 million worldwide in what was the highest grossing installment in the 585 million plus grossing franchise. Oh, these numbers I'm throwing at you. I'm not a numbers guy, so I probably don't even read them well. Similar to Chapter 3, Chapter 4 is, what a weird line, hot with older guys and older women. Really? Okay, let's just unpack this sentence here. The last movie released in May 2019 drew 45% men over 25, 29% women over 25, the babes like John Wick, and men under 25 at 18%. So let me get this straight. Hot with older guys and older women. They consider over 25 qualified. I mean, I guess technically, semantically, that's accurate, but like, why is it not popular with men under 25? Really? What's happened to to this young generation? When I was a kid, I couldn't wait to see our movies. I begged my parents to watch Terminator 2 when I was 13. I had to see it. It was my first R-rated film. 13? No, I was not that. It was like 10. I don't know. I don't even remember my own ages that well when I was a kid. I was pretty young. It's like whenever Terminator 2 was a big deal. So the kids these days don't like the R-rated movies, huh? I don't know. I don't know what's up with that. Oh, and then this line. The movie is also over-indexing with black moviegoers. Why are we doing this in our society? This is so weird to me. Who cares? Like, who cares what color your skin is when you're going to see a movie? Why are these media companies so obsessed with this all the time? I really think it must be the most insulting thing in the world to be black and to be reading this. I mean, I don't know. I'm just assuming if I were reading this, I would, this would be insulting to me. I'd be like, well, what do I got to do with it? It's just, yeah, if I like the movie, I'll go see it. Shut the fuck up. I'll try to keep the cussing to a minimum because I'm trying to be good. Polo Surf says, earn the ticket price. Jam all your shots into an auditorium and let's go. I like that. Polo Surf says, like an actual thought-out feature, not just rehearsed, bloated runtime like Batman or Babylon. I just love 3-hour-plus epics. I sense you might be sarcastic there. I actually love 3-hour epics when it is earned. RRR deserved 3 hours. Like, Titanic deserved 3. Yes, I love Titanic. I do. I'm a nautical guy. Captain, hello. And I'm a historical guy. So I kind of was obsessed with the Titanic, And I'm really mad that Jack didn't make it because he couldn't get on that floating dresser or whatever it was, the door. It's really, to this day, it breaks me up. But anyway, a 3-hour film that earns its time deserves it. And from what I hear, this one does. Fu Man Blue says, was 3 the one where he fought in that glass room? Yes, it was. He took so much battle damage that it got to comic movie levels. Agreed. But it's fine, I guess, if you're in that mindset and he's a super. That's a very fair criticism. I will say this. Even in the first film, I think he's pretty superhuman. In the first film, he does things and he survives things that just they strain credulity. But what I will say is, what I like about John Wick, because I'm a child of the 80s. I remember Stallone. I remember Rambo movies. I remember Predator. I remember films like that where, you want to talk about superhuman. Rambo was unkillable. He was just unkillable. You couldn't, and of course the bullets would always go wide. He'd never actually get hit. The bad guys would fire. Star Wars gets a lot of shit for the stormtroopers missing all the time, but that was just a trope. That was just the way it was in action movies for a long time. The bad guys always miss. That was just the trope. What I like about John Wick is that the reason he's so superhuman is just that he has a really superhuman level of ability. And he also has a mental attitude that makes him superior because he is a man of focus. commitment, sheer will. That is John Wick, right? That's really his superpower. In the same way that Batman's superpower is sort of obsession, right? That's his superpower. John Wick's superpower is that he's so focused on getting what he wants that he will learn any skill, take any action necessary. He will cultivate any ability he must have to get what he wants. And in his case, that is to kill like 50 people. That's his superpower. But he is very much killable. He really is, because every movie he takes some kind of wound and it accumulates. Like he starts to limp. He has to go to a doctor. There's literally a scene in the third film where he has to sew himself up because if he keeps bleeding, he'll die. And he makes mistakes. He gets caught sometimes. Like in the first film, he makes kind of a dumb mistake and he gets knocked out by the bad guy. So he can be defeated. He's not invincible. It's just that he's so damn good and he's so smart about planning everything. It's actually when he's not. Usually when John Wick doesn't have the initiative is when he's at his most vulnerable. It's when he has the initiative, he's undefeatable. He's death's very messenger, as it's put in the second film, which I love. But then when he's on his back foot, that's when he's in danger. But he always plans for that. He always plans for when he'll be. That's why he's always got things stashed away. He's always got a gun stashed somewhere because he knows that when he's on his back foot, he'll need a backup plan. So that's part of why he's so what I like about it is this. In the old days, you'd always have the trope where the bad guy gets winged and they let him sort of crawl away and then the bad guy comes back with an axe. John Wick doesn't allow that. So in turn, his villains must equal that in order to beat him. They must also be lethal and unforgiving and merciless. That's what I like about it. So to the extent that John Wick is undefeatable, kind of so are his enemies. Like, obviously, the goons, he can take those out by the dozen. But the actual enemies that are arraying forces against him have to be very cunning. And I like that also. And that's actually kind of refreshing. There's not a lot of action heroes that are like this. So yes, he is still outlandish. I'm not denying that. But he's not unkillable. And I really enjoy that about his character. And he's not superhuman in strength. He may be superhuman in endurance. Because let's face it, especially at his age, having a gunshot wound and still fighting. Like, dude, if you've ever taken martial arts classes, you will not believe how quickly you can get winded. It's unbelievable. In fact, one of the tactics in martial arts is to move as little as possible while keeping your enemy moving. If you keep your enemy just moving, that runs out their energy. So it is not easy to stay in the fight for a long, extended period. So yes, he is very superhuman in that regard. Poloserve. I haven't been a fan of Wick so far. God damn it, it's the most popular R-rated franchise right now. There's just too much technology competition. I get it, Poloserve. I'll tell you what, I resisted seeing the first film for years. Years that film was out, and I wouldn't see it because I thought it was going to be dumb. And it was because it looked like a Keanu. There was a lot of other dumb action movies at the time, and I just remember John Wick, they would always play that clip in every single trailer. It's like, people keep asking if I'm back, and I'm thinking I'm back. And I was like, this is going to be the dumbest. This is Keanu Reeves grasping at straws is what this movie is going to be. And I remember thinking, I'll never watch this movie. Also, the color palette. I know this sounds super like, yes, the color palette of the film was just not to my liking. But the color palette was very gray, and for some reason, I just didn't find that very exciting in the trailers, and it looked boring to me. It looked like the most by the numbers. It looked like a Jason Statham movie, but with less energy is kind of what it looked like to me. And then one rainy night, I put it on Netflix because I had just heard so many people talking about it, and I watched it, and I freaking loved it. I was like, that is a perfect film. Like, it was. And what was so great about it, too, is it had this emotional core to it that was so earned. And it made you care about why he's on this mission. There's a lot of revenge movies, and you just don't really care. Like, I watched that Liam Neeson movie, Cold Pursuit, recently. And to be fair, it kind of plays it for laughs anyway. It's kind of making fun of itself. It's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek satire. But even so, I could not make myself care about one damn thing he does in that movie. I just couldn't care. So to have a revenge film where you really do care about the bad guys getting what they deserve, it's not just a simple matter of having a bad baddie. You can't just have a bad guy who does bad things that are odious and terrible. They have to be odious and terrible things that really hit you where it hurts. And in John Wick 1, it hits you where it hurts. Like, what they do to him in that first movie is horrific. And for a very well thought out emotional reason. And that's what the film builds on. So check it out, Polosurf. I wouldn't steer you wrong. Santiago says, don't get me started at what such a horrible person Rose is. She is the real villain in Titanic. Rose is the villain. She's the 1912 version of an Instagram thought, for sure. So Fu Man Blue says, yeah, Cap, that vision of him was badass. I didn't keep up with the chat, so I don't know what you're referring to there. Polosurf says, I recently saw the Titanic re-release in 3D, and for some reason, I found it was very entertaining, but then the ship wrecked, and I felt as though it went on and on. But to be fair, back then I was a kid. I used to pop in the VHS and skip over the talking. I get that. But hey, I used to watch Star Trek, and I'd skip to the battle scenes with the ships, and now in my older days, I really enjoy, like, Cisco having a conversation with his son about what he's going to do with his life, when I didn't care about those scenes when I was a kid. So I think the sinking of the Titanic is the best part of the film. Something you may not realize. That's real time. Like, the ship sinks in real time. The time it takes in the movie for the ship to sink is how much, I probably am repeating myself now, but that's how much time it took in real life for the ship to go down. Cameron is obsessed with the Titanic, and he's obsessed with the ocean, hence Avatar: Way of Water, and he always has been. And in that film, he kind of invented a lot of the technology that allowed him to make Avatar. But he replicated so many technically accurate things about that ship, it's unbelievable. Like, he really hired the actual upholsterers who did the actual upholstery in the original RMS Titanic to recreate all the furniture. Everything you see in that movie is pretty much what the Titanic would have really looked like. There are a couple, like, plot details that are fictional that are totally bullshit. Like when they put all the steerage people behind that cage and they won't let the steerage people out. It's like, that was the fact that Murdoch, the first officer, shoots himself. That was totally false. And the family of Murdoch, the real life Murdoch, actually wanted to sue the film company over that, because they're like, you depicted our ancestor as having killed himself when he didn't, because in the film he had shot one of the passengers, which also did not happen. So anyway, I went on too long about that. But so yeah, Titanic, give it a second chance. I don't know. But yeah, Rose is a monster. Fu Man Blue says, yeah, that's weird. When I was young, I hated Star Trek, the original movie. Now I relish seeing all my old friends just talk about life. Dude, even like Star Trek 2, when Bones and Kirk have that conversation about getting older, it's great, man. I probably need to switch my overlay here. I'm leaving you poor guys on deadline forever, and that's just not, that's not a cool thing to do. Going through the chat. So I'm getting used to all this, how does it work? Where's is the light on? Wick's villains have been so lame, but perhaps it's purely by design, Polosurf says. Wick's villains have been lame. What do you mean by lame? Because I feel like I almost half agree with you. If you mean by lame that they are not like super cool and badass or super great threats with amazing personality, I probably agree with you. Are they a threat to John Wick? Or are they an interesting foil to him? I would say they are. So like the Russian mob boss in the beginning, I think is in the first film, is super interesting. And I'll give you one example of why. There's a great moment when his idiot son, who has caused the whole problem in the first place, has been punched in the face by basically a car chop. The guy who runs the car chop shop, played by John Leguizamo, he punches the kid right in the face, and he basically just punched the son of the mob boss in the face. And this is a bad thing to do if you're in a criminal organization. And so, naturally, the head of the crime family, the Russian mob boss, he calls John Leguizamo and he's like, I heard that you punched my son. And you know this is not the kind of conversation you want to be on the wrong end of, right? And so John Leguizamo says, yes, sir, I did. And he's like, calmly, the Russian asks, may I ask why? Because he stole John Wick's car and he redacted because of spoilers. And the Russian guy, who is clearly moving in the direction of, I'm going to have you killed for this, immediately says, oh, I understand. And he hangs up the phone. And it's like, because he knows that was a good reason to punch my son. That's interesting. I like that. I like that he's not a mustache twirling villain who's like, oh, but you punched my son, I'm going to have you killed anyway. I like that he's got this, oh, yeah, I would have punched my son for that too. And he hangs up the phone. Like, that's interesting. So is that lame? I would say no. I would say that's interesting. But I can't remember that character's name. So that's at least evidence he's not that super interesting to me. Off the top of my head, I can't remember the guy's name. So is there any villain in John Wick I've really thought? I hear the 1 in 4 is good. Chris Gore said is it Bill Skarsgård, I think, who plays the villain in 4? Apparently he's really good. I don't think so. I don't think there's actually a villain in John Wick that really stands out as just an epic, awesome villain. So I think you're actually kind of right about that. But they are a challenge to him, which I do appreciate. And they're kind of interesting in that they all have good reasons for the way that they are. Like the Russian mob boss, he's kind of interesting because you can see what his personality is. You can see he's got this kind of code of ethics. He understands John Wick's anger at his son because John Wick wants revenge on his son. And he kind of agrees with John Wick, which is what's funny about it. Because he's like, yeah, I get it. I know why you want to kill my idiot son. I'm sorry. He's kind of an idiot. I get it. He is my son, and if you try to kill him, I'm going to have to kill you and everything you care about. And it's like, I think that's interesting. Like, he's not just a typical mustache-twirling villain. So, yeah. Tom says drink. That's because I did the Keanu Reeves impression, I suspect. Fu Man Blue says, yeah, it started and won that conversation. Captain Boomer. I think technically I am maybe a Gen Xer or a millennial. I'm right on the fault line between Gen X and millennial because it's 83. So I feel more like a millennial than a Gen Xer, but maybe I'm not though, because honestly, I kind of miss punk rock a little. That's a Gen X thing, right? I picture him as the Russian boss, Fu Man Blue says. Was it Falcone in the first Nolan Batman? Yes, it was. Oh, you mean the actor? No, the actor who played Falcone was the great Tom Wilkinson, I love that guy. He's a great actor. That was not who played the Russian in John Wick. But you couldn't go wrong bringing Tom Wilkinson into the franchise. What else we got to talk about, Sailors and Star Nuts? We've been going a while here. Eric July was in the news and bounding into comics. I'm gonna fix my browser again. Oh no, it's all gone wonky. So I don't know if you know about this, but they're making a new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles show, and you may have noticed something a little bit different about the portrayal of Wendy. Wendy. What did I say, Wendy? I'm thinking of the Peter Pan thing. April O'Neil. This is your new April O'Neil. And Eric July had some feelings about this. The creator of ISOM, also known as the Young Rippa, Hat Tip the Young Rippa. Try this headline. YouTuber Angry Joe requests an apology from ISOM creator Eric July after July called him out for false accusations over April O'Neil race swap criticism. So they got into this Twitter spat because basically Eric July puts out this tweet, right? Let me make sure I've got this centered right. So Eric July tweets this, and this is his image, right? He says, "Tell me you didn't pay money for this. New TMNT animated reboot opts to tokenize April O'Neil as a fat black woman. This has resulted in fake fans spreading already debunked misinformation. DOA. Full video is live on YouTube." And this is the thing. I feel like, let me just skip real quick to, before I get into the Twitter fight, I want to get to Melanie Mack's post. Okay, this is what Melanie Mack, YouTuber Melanie Mack, had to say about this. And I think she's right on the money here. She said, "As always, people are pulling the racist card at any April O'Neil criticism, white, quote-unquote, activists at that. April is supposed to be beautiful. They could have given us a cute black April. They made her ugly on purpose. Race plays no role in that." And she puts this kind of comparison here. And I think this is exactly the point, is that, and this is the other thing. Like, how insulting must it be to be a black person in America right now? It's like you are the football caught in this bizarre, woke SJW war that they are waging on everything in culture. They're trying to literally dismantle and destroy everything, and they are using what they consider to be marginalized groups, victims who are so powerless and can't help themselves, and we must help them. And this is what they do. They say, we have to make them unattractive, unappealing people, and we have to give them the roles that were once roles that white people had. But we're not going to create any new original black characters, right? Because we don't actually believe in having new original black characters. But what we do believe in is giving them, as Eric July puts it, the sloppy seconds of white characters, and then making them unattractive to boot. And this is also because, and this isn't 100% a race thing. This is also just our new culture thing. This is actually the reason that I am kind of coming back to religion in my life, because I was an atheist for a long time after having a miserable existence as a Catholic as a teenager. And now I'm definitely not going back to that. But I am coming back in my own way. I'm at least at this point. I no longer believe that there is no God. And I'm kind of coming to believe that there certainly almost has to be one. And I have to tell you, what has proven to me that part of what has brought me to this realization is watching how the materialistic view of the entire universe has created a movement towards ugliness in all things. And I mean, literally, our culture is beginning to value specifically ugly, undesirable things. Now, I'm not attacking anyone's personal appearance, right? Look, we all have things we're unhappy about, and I'm not saying that a human's value is only their beauty. Of course not. What I'm saying is, perfect example, people are being fat. They're being shamed for being fit, right? They're literally making this argument now in the media that, like, people that are obsessed with fitness and working out and getting jacked, they are essentially mostly alt-right people, right? It's like they're politicizing working out. And they're basically saying that, like, Adele, the singer, losing weight, that's shaming fat people. And so what they're saying is, I think all of this came from you're fine the way you are. That movement in the 90s, and it's like it went too far, because now we've come to the conclusion that everybody's fine exactly how they are, and we're not fine. We are not fine. Like, our country, the obesity in our country, I used to kind of believe it was a result of, like, mentality, just like people kind of losing control of, I've struggled with being overweight, and I used to think it was just, eat less, right? And I actually now realize from my travels that a lot of it is the fact that our diet is terrible. Like, our ancestors did not eat this way. Our ancestors did not eat things like candy bars and bleached white bread. Okay, I'm going on a tangent. My point is, it's not entirely our fault that our society is deteriorating with, people struggling with their weight, struggling with depression. We have an epidemic of drug use and fentanyl and all this stuff. And what does the media tell us about all of this? They tell us you're fine just the way you are. And you know why? It's because they're trying to hide the fact that they're part of the reason for all this crap. They're part of the reason that people are so unhealthy because they are not telling the truth about the things that are making us unhealthy. Why are so many young people depressed? Because social media can be damaging to your mental health. It can be damaging, and we're not addressing that issue. So instead of addressing that issue, they create all these fake, stupid things about, well, we're fat shaming. And it's like, that's why teens are committing suicide, because people are fat shaming. It's like, no, they're committing suicide because they're overweight and they're looking for answers in life. And the only answers they get from you parasitic media types is you're fine just the way you are. And you just need to be angry at all the people who don't understand you. That is what this symbolizes to me. This symbolizes the worship of no longer aspiring to things in life, no longer aspiring to being better than you were yesterday. That is what the point of this is. And this is what they're projecting onto. Okay, that was a long tangent. But my point is, this is why I take issue with this. Let me check the chat real quick before I dig into this. I'm trying to balance everything. Polo Surf says, what are your must-see upcoming movies? What are you excited for? Well, you know John Wick 4 is on that list. Mission Impossible 5, holy crap. Am I excited for that movie? I'm so excited for that movie. Polo Surf, personally for me, it's easily Beau is Afraid. I'm not familiar with that one. I'll have to check that one out. I think this, Fu Man Blue says, I think this TMNT is going to be a movie. Is it a movie or a show? I thought it was a movie. I thought it was a show at first, and now, yeah, I think it's a movie. A24's biggest horror movie at $55 million. Okay, I'll have to check that out. That would be Beau is Afraid. Look, horror movies, I'm very persnickety on horror movies. They have to be good. They have to be good. And for me, good means there has to be something compelling in the story that makes me interested. If it's just like torture porn or whatever, I'm just not into it. But if it's like, I guess it's not really a horror movie, but The Menu, I liked that movie. That was a good movie. Yeah, there's never been a generation so consumed by anxiety. Absolutely. What we are doing to kids with our modern culture is horrible, because I've lived through anxiety and depression and addiction and being overweight. I know what hopelessness feels like. And I know that if I had been told that the reason that I was so hopeless and angry was because, a bunch of alt-right people just don't like that you're fat, but you're fine the way you are, that would not have helped my mental state. That would not have been helpful to me. And that's why I sympathize with this bizarre argument that we're having. And so anyway, let me see if I can find this. So Eric July points this out. His, I believe Gabe El Taib is he does the drawing or the art or the colors in the comic book. I think he actually does the drawing of the comic book, and I should know that, but I just don't remember. But he says in his tweet, April O'Neil is a white redheaded lady. Just stop, you dummies. And then, yeah, we get a couple other posts, and then comes in Angry Joe. I don't really know much about Angry Joe. I'm new to YouTube, believe it or not. I kind of began this journey a year ago. And so I know everybody in the Fellowship, but I don't, anything outside that, I only know when the Fellowship talk about them. But at Angry Joe says, racist. April O'Neil is white, not black. I'm tired of being replaced. This is BS. Woke, woke, woke. That's his impression of the objection that we have to this. And then he says, not racist weirdos. I don't care that she's black, but why isn't... Oh yeah, he's in quotes. Not racist weirdos. I don't care that she's black, but why isn't this 12-year-old hot and sexy instead of ugly and fat? Can't wank. Rest of us, who the fuck cares? Is it a good movie? So he's basically implying, and in this tweet, he puts in the picture Eric July's tweet and he puts Melanie Max in there as well. Right? And so he's basically implying, is Gabe's in there? I forget. Anyway, so he's basically implying that their critique is that they want a hot and sexy 12-year-old to be depicted. So they're implying that they are pedos. And then they're implying that they're racist. And Eric July took issue with this. So let me find his tweet. Where is it? because they have the whole thread in here. There it is. Okay, so Eric July says, so what happened was they got into a fight about this, and then July basically said, like, if I see you at a con, I'm going to come up to your booth and we're going to have a conversation about this. And Joe, of course, took this to be a physical threat. And if you know anything about Eric July, he would never make a physical threat because only a weak man feels the need to do that. Eric July is absolutely 100% confident in himself, in his success, and in his masculinity. He has no need to prove himself with physical violence. But what he is saying is, you don't get to call me a racist and a pedophile on the internet and not answer for that conversationally in person. Like, in person, I'm going to have this conversation with you, and I'm going to want an explanation. And so Angry Joe's like, oh, you threatened me, and you sicked all of your alt-right trolls on me, and you got to apologize. And so July basically said, I'm not apologizing for shit. You put it in the post, it's still up, and you included me. Because Joe's argument was, well, I just screenshotted you. I wasn't calling out you specifically. And this is what he's saying. He's like, if you're excluding me and didn't mean it, you go detract, I think he means retract, the post, or add and clarify. Gabe isn't a moron, by the way. Stop with the ho shit, though. Words to think it did. Your post includes me. If that's a mistake, say that, but don't act like it's some irrational position. And so he got like 1,200 likes on this tweet. Then Joe comes back with, of course you aren't. And you also want to threaten me in person over this shit? You got some big head thinking I'm over here directly addressing you in my tweet and now doubling down. Real tough guy. Over a cartoon character? That's the real ho shit. Stop embarrassing yourself. He gets 289 likes. And he's got a huge following, so he's getting ratioed in like every single tweet. And don't you just love this straw man argument here? Over a cartoon character. Over a cartoon character. No, the objection is not to a cartoon character, dumbass. The objection is to you accusing four, or I think he had four in the picture, at least two that I saw in that tweet. Melanie Mack and Eric July, he accused them both of being racist and pedophiles. And of course, Eric July takes particular exception to that, being that he is himself black, and is like, don't you dare be calling me a racist. Like, you're going to have to explain yourself. And it's amazing how, he tries to shift the narrative to over a cartoon character. That's not what it's about. This is amazing too. They act like, what are you guys getting so upset about? Why are you so upset all the time? We're just talking about cartoons here. It's like, what are you so upset about, Joe? You're the one that brought the R word and the P word into a discussion about a cartoon. You're the one that needs to answer for that, not us, not Eric July, not Melanie Mack. So then he replies, Eric July says, I didn't threaten you, but you absolutely should be pulled up on and facing the people you liken to pedos or racists. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. I freaking love the way Eric does this, right? Because he goes, this is the thing. Jordan Peterson has one of his 12 rules for life is always tell the truth. And he says, but that's hard to do. So if it's hard to know what the truth is in your, sometimes, but you can at least not tell a lie. And when you are a person who lives by that principle, it's actually very easy to debate with people because you're not trying to hide anything. You know exactly what you believe, and you're speaking your honest mind about it. And so for Eric, it's easy for him to always reject the premise because he's not trying to lie or misrepresent his position or someone else's. He doesn't need anyone to have a position so that he can debate with it. So he doesn't need straw man arguments. He just goes right for it. I'm not embarrassed. I didn't threaten you, but you are going to answer in person for what you said if I see you, because that's what's going to happen. And so then Joe says, you said you're going to come up at me in real life if you see me, and I wouldn't have this energy in person, meaning Eric July was saying to Joe, you wouldn't have this energy in person, meaning, yeah, saying this to someone's face is a lot different story. And then Joe says, what? You injected yourself. I should be pulled up on? Calm the F down. You're being purposely offended now. You ain't got to get bent out of shape. It's over. And then Eric July comes back with, again, 91 likes on that tweet. These are screenshots, so this may have changed. And so as of time of screenshot. But at last I saw that he was getting ratioed. But anyway, Eric July says, I said I'm coming to see you in the event we're in the same place. I didn't inject myself. You're the one that made the tweet with me in it. And absolutely, you should be pulled up on by the people you liken to fucked up things. Doesn't matter who they are. Quit with the dramatics. This is slight work. 517 likes. So, yes. And the writer makes a kind of goes on a tangent here. So, there you have it. Now, this is a fun story, though. I'm just going to double check the chat real quick. Janie in the chat. Hello, JD. How's it going? Fu Man Blue. Overindulgence is the new American way. You know what's interesting about that, Fu Man Blue? Just to circle back for a second to the thing about the body positivity and all that. This is a way of our culture rationalizing a really unhealthy system of creating nutrition, which is not my most eloquent way of putting it. I guess what I'm trying to say is, yes, overindulgence is part of it, but we also are at a huge disadvantage, like just naturally, because all of our foods are so nutrient poor because they are all optimized to taste good. And when it's optimized to taste good and sell cheaply, right, you wind up with a lot of foods that are very nutrient poor, but very tasty because they're loaded with salt and sugar and fat. And so, and I'm not 100% blaming companies for this. Companies are giving customers what they want, and we as humans want stuff that's sugary, fatty, and salty. So it's not, it's a two-way street. But the point is, think how hard it is to feel full and satisfied and not hungry when all the food you eat is, a lot of it, most of it, really, honestly, is junk. I mean, any kid's cereal is junk. That is not in nature. The nourishment you would give to children for most of humanity's existence on this planet would have been nothing like that. Even just giving them a bowl of oatmeal is 100 times better than giving them Fruit Loops. That's just completely nutrient deficient, bleached flour. That gives them almost no sustaining nourishment. So my point about this is how our whole diet is. So why does that tie back to the whole body positivity thing? Because we are like people that our culture is like a person with a mental illness who's in denial, or not, better way to put it. As a culture, we are like a person who has an addiction and is in denial about it. I can quit drinking anytime I want. Right? That's what body positivity is to me. It's a way of covering up the sickness in our society. And the sickness in our society is that our entire system of eating is fucked. It's completely fucked and stacked against us. And rather than hold to account ourselves and the companies that are selling us this food, because it is a two-way street, but rather than holding our own society, our own selves, and our own companies to account on this, we decide to embark upon a quest of saying, you know what? Being fat is beautiful. And that's fucked up. Janie says, and low testosterone and infertility. Thanks, microplastics. Yeah, I mean, again, we have many things in our society, technologically, culturally, that are not working. And what we're doing is we're papering over all that with stupid, bizarre beliefs. The woke mind virus is adopting. It's like it's sucking up every stupid idea that helps us stay in denial about the real problems that we have. As a culture. An awful lot of projection from Angry Joe, says Janie. Cowards never want a face-to-face. No, they don't. And it's really interesting. When you go on the internet, I'm a free speech absolutist, so I have zero problem with someone going on the internet and saying X person is a racist, and I think they're a garbage human. And I also have no problem with the person that's on the receiving end of that saying, what do you mean by that? And if I see you in public, I'd like to have a conversation about it, right? Because that's fair game. You're the person who made an accusation. Own the consequences of that. Like, we used to have in Western civilization, we used to have a concept called honor. And if you're a fan of Worf and Star Trek, you may have heard something. This is really a Western civilization concept: is that your word is your bond, and a man has. And by extension, all of humanity has a code of honor that we should adhere to. And one of the elements of a code of honor is, you're responsible for the things you accuse other people of. And so that's what I think about that. Fu Man Blue says Lucky Charms is now in the food triangle the government is pushing. Yes, absolutely. Melodic Method says you have to make your own food if you want to eat healthy. Really, you do, and you have to go to like the source materials of the food. You can't just go. That's why they say packaged foods are so bad, because they're stuffed with salt and fat. You have to go and get your own beans, like dry goods, and actually make your own stuff to really be healthy and nutrient rich. And really, if you can, doing your own like urban farming or whatever, it'd be the best thing. But Fu Man Blue says, I eat garbage, but I only eat a little. Yeah, I eat garbage too, Fu Man Blue. I'm not shaming anyone's habits. I'm just saying I have a more complex view of it than I used to have. I used to just think of it as like, you shouldn't eat so much, or I shouldn't eat so much. And now I think it's that plus, wow, we've got problems in how we do food in this country, period. So self-control is key. It is key. Honesty is also key, like being able to speak honestly about it, So Janie says, micro and nanoplastics are now turning up in apples, carrots, and lettuce. Yikes. Oh, God, no, let's not turn this into the micro. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. Except for sea turtles. Their diet of straws is all paper now. The sea turtle diet is, yeah, you're right. It's all paper. So, yeah. Anyway. Now, getting back to this story, though, because I want to talk about this, because this is more evidence of Eric July's point, because it turns out that race-swapping Tinkerbell has actually united the internet. This from TMZ. Peter Pan and Wendy, Twitter is pissed over Black Tinkerbell, would rather have new POC characters. Now, this, by the way, Eric July gets painted, who is, of course, himself a black man, gets painted as a racist, gets painted as an alt-right MAGA Trump supporter, even though he hates Trump, and he's a libertarian, and he doesn't even believe in actually having police, believe it or not. And I'd love to hear his reasons for that, because I'm fascinated. I definitely don't agree with that. But, so he's basically, not in the BLM way, but he doesn't believe there should be a state-run police force, which I find really interesting. And so he gets accused of all the things he's not. And what is his whole point? His whole point is and go watch his video on his channel, Young Ripa 59, because he does a great breakdown of what is tokenization, and his explanation of it is really excellent. And it's very simple. It's like, why do they race swap a character? Well, what race swapping is, because it only goes one direction, right? They never race swap a person of color into a white person. They don't do that. So when they are doing it, what they're doing is they're giving a white, like basically what was historically a white character, they're giving it to a black person and saying, here, you can now have. This is Eric July's argument. You can now have this white person's sloppy seconds. But what we're not going to do is invest the time and energy and creativity that it takes to create an actual original black character, because we know deep down it wouldn't be successful. And this is what Eric July is saying. This is what it means that when they race swap. It means they don't actually have the confidence, or frankly, they just don't give a shit enough to create an original black character. And he's been saying this for years. And what's interesting is that the internet is starting to catch up to this, because they basically had, people think Disney's choice to make Tinkerbell black in the upcoming Peter Pan and Wendy flick, instead of making a new character for a person of color, is a terrible move. And now Twitter is up in arms and over it. What a shock. So this is the new Tinkerbell, and beautiful actress, absolutely. But it's just the wrong casting. And here's one tweet. Disney couldn't care less about making new stories with POC characters. They just put POC people to play white characters, and that shows, one, how lazy Disney is, and two, how racist this is. It's like they don't think that POC people deserve their own stories, beside like 3 animated movies. Yeah, so basically there are a whole bunch of tweets where there's actually a lot of people on both sides getting angry about this. So I just found that interesting. I think people are catching up to the fact that the critique is not that there is a person of color in a movie. The critique is, why aren't you investing in original characters with actors that can actually that fit the role? Like, why not build new things, Disney? It's like, why not honor the past, let your characters be what they were, and like, if you want more diversity, having new opportunities for basically everybody to participate is a good thing. Create some new things. Create new things, but you don't believe it would work and you're lazy. And that's the whole problem. So let's check in with the chat. Fu Man Blue says, like our white bread. Fu Man Blue says, Az called him Pate Pan. Laughed my ass off. Yes, Pate Pan. What do I want to cover next? I got to think about this for a second. We have been going... How long have we been going? Almost 2 hours? Cool, we'll keep on going. We'll keep having fun over here. The Swords of Starships. Vessel of imagination. Entertainment. All right, you know what? Let's talk about The Last of Us. I am overdue for my review of Last of Us, and I've been dragging my feet on it. I fully admit it. I'm guilty of it. Part of it is my excitement for Picard, because I'm really into Picard. Picard is going great. Okay. I'm messing up my... There we go. Try this headline from Bounding Into Comics. HBO's The Last of Us depicts cannibal enemies from first game as Christian zealots. Now, before we go forward, this is a spoiler alert. If you're wanting to watch the most recent episode of Last of Us and you haven't seen it, there will be spoilers here. Okay, so you have been warned. Spoilers. This is what I will say about the most recent episode of The Last of Us, which I believe was episode 8. This was the best episode of the series, I felt. And it was the first episode... This was Joel's best ever episode. And it should have been like the third or fourth episode. And this is my whole critique, because I know that some people are really enjoying The Last of Us. I do not see what people see in this show. And what amazes me is Mahler likes this show. And I was fascinated to hear that he liked this show. And I understand his reasons. I don't know what he sees in it. And I don't know what anyone sees in it, because... There's kind of two schools of thought on this. It's hewing close to the game, and the game was really good, and we like that. If that is the case, I see no reason to play the game, because if this is the story in the game, it was overrated, right? Now, I happen to believe it's not fair. That's why I tend to think it's not hewing very close to the game. And to the extent it's not hewing close to the game, but we're enjoying it as its own thing, that's the second school of thought. I still don't understand that, because this show is mediocre. It has moments that are epic and awesome. Moments. But in between those moments is a bunch of filler, a bunch of side characters, a bunch of needless backstory and flashbacks. And through it all is a super uninteresting Ellie. This character does nothing for me. She is snarky. She's bossy. She is annoying. When she's emotional, I don't care. When she's vulnerable, I'm not afraid for her. I just don't know what it is about. It's partly the actress, you know. There's something weird about her. I just don't like. She's one of these actors that Hollywood loves and they want the rest of us to love. And it's like, stop trying to make Bella Ramsey happen. She's not going to happen. Like, it's like, I don't know. Maybe she's got a bright future ahead of her in future properties, but she's weird. She's weird, and she has no charisma. Part of it is the writing, though. To be fair to Bella Ramsey, part of it is the writing. She's not a well-written character. Her backstory's boring. I don't understand. She doesn't have really any personality. Her personality is that she's got so much personality. Look at all those sarcastic things she says all the time. I don't care. Joel is awful in this show. He's weak. He gets pwned every 2 seconds in this show. And like he almost, you know what it is? It's like on my last stream, I said The Last Jedi was like that nightmare where you can never, like you're trying to tell someone something and your voice doesn't work. I'm getting that weird feeling with Joel in this show where it's like he almost gets awesome and then they immediately take it away. It's like he'll be the epic sniper picking off zombies in one episode and then he gets stabbed like a total punk in the next episode. And then he's sick for 2 episodes. And it's like, oh, fuck. I just want to... Can we just see him kick a little ass from, take a page out of Yellowstone or something? I haven't even seen Yellowstone, but I suspect Kevin Costner is more of a badass in that show than Joel is in this one. However, in this most recent episode, Joel is pretty awesome. Up until the end, when it just sort of, the end just sort of happens and it peters out and it's basically what happens is Joel goes full blown awesome mode. And I know this is in the game because I remember Mahler was like, wait for it, just wait for it. Joel's about to kick ass in this next one. And I'm like, okay, so that tells me this is close to the game then. Not impressed because he kicks a bunch of ass and then I'm expecting this scene because really the show sets up that he's got to go rescue her from these cannibals. And it sets up that she's going to need help. And it's kind of one of those things where 2 characters are kind of working their way to the middle. And so Ellie is trying to survive and Joel is kicking ass to try and save her. And it's kind of a meet in the middle thing. And that would have been epic. That would have been super cool. But instead of meet in the middle, Ellie saves herself and kills the bad guy. And she escapes on her own. And then Joel shows up having done a bunch of badassery and gives her a hug. And he calls her baby girl. And it is meant to be heartfelt. It is meant to be a wonderful emotional payoff. And I felt nothing. Actually, no, I didn't feel nothing. I felt weird. It was like, it hit a false note. When he says baby girl, I didn't buy it. I'm like, he doesn't feel that way about her. It's, it's like when 2 unattractive actors are having a romantic scene and it's awkward. That's, obviously this is not a romantic scene, but my point is there's something awkward about it. It's like, I don't believe this father-daughter relationship yet. And I'm never going to, because it's never going to get there. So that just but this is what I did not know. Because I watched the episode and I actually quite liked the bad guys in this. And I actually have to say, what was great about this episode was it was like that onion that, the dumbass Rian Johnson wishes his glass onion would be like. This episode actually kind of was like an onion where the layers keep coming off and you keep learning more as you go deeper. And the reveals on top of the reveals that were subtle and they were carefully placed and they kind of slowly a picture begins to form. Because there were a couple things in the beginning I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would they do this if that? And then you kind of get to the answer and you're like, oh. And it's, well, this kind of spoils it. They're cannibals. Great job, Captain. You had one job to tell a compelling narrative and you screwed it up. So anyway, let me check in on the chat. I don't want to get ahead of I don't want to get ahead of the chat. Okay, cool. All right. So in this headline, they basically say HBO's The Last of Us depicts cannibal enemies from the first game as Christian zealots. Now, this is interesting because I hadn't played the game. I just took it at face value. And this guy is basically leading this kind of, I wouldn't say it's a cult, but they're basically like a group of Christians surviving in the apocalypse. And there's some weird stuff going on, but nothing too out of the ordinary. What I did not know is that, so here was the original game storyline. During the course of the 2013 game, a solo hunting trip by Ellie sees her run into 2 men known as David and James, who were eventually revealed to be the heads of an openly cannibalistic group of survivors. Captured with the intent of being their next meal, a combination of desperation and her small size allows Ellie to escape from their clutches by the skin of her teeth before eventually killing David during a desperate final struggle. And that's pretty cool. That's all they were. 2 guys, 2 rando cannibals they run into in the game. In this episode, they have an entire narrative, how they're like a group of Mormons, not actually Mormons, but as if they're kind of like, or like Baptists, they're like a very devout Christian group. And the leader, it's the typical trope. It's so typical. It's like, I mean, yes, they're competent writers. They are competent writers. So I'm not going to say that they're writing one-dimensional characters because they're not. And the plot was very multi-layered in a smart way. And so basically, it's the trope of the cult leader, is basically what it is. It's the overzealot Christian who has repressed anger issues. It's always that, right? It's always that, he's so pious and he's so good, and then smack someone across the face. And it's like, yeah, it's not that it's not well written in this episode, but it has been done like a million times, and not totally without reason. I mean, there is an element in all religions of hypocrisy, so I'm not saying it isn't a valid trope, but it's been done, okay? But that being said, the episode was well written and the reveals were good payoffs. When I read this, I'm like, well, what do we have here? So they added that entire religious skin to the story. They basically reskinned the whole story, no pun intended, as not religious Christian cannibals that are being duped, by the way, by their pastor, essentially. However, while the game's characterization of the two cannibals simply depicts them as unhinged but resilient in the face of the apocalypse psychopaths, HBO's live-action adaptation opted to provide some additional and unnecessary context to the characters' backstories, making their small screen debuts at the beginning of the show's 8th episode, When We Are Need. The first to be introduced is David, who in addition to being an unapologetic cannibal, a fact that is not revealed until the episode's climax, is now shown to also be a Christian preacher. Next up is James, who is notably portrayed by the actor who brought Joel Miller to life in the original games, Troy Baker, himself also a devout Christian who uses the Bible to support his actions. The episode actually opens with David reciting the Revelations 21:1-4 titled A New Heaven and a New Earth, telling his congregants, "And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes," he goes on. When he eventually meets Ellie, David attempts to convince the young girl that she can trust him by informing her that he is a man of faith, only for Ellie to respond by ridiculing him for believing in God. Admittedly, this is not the first time the series has expanded on the backstory of a character from the game, and then they reference, of course, Bill and Frank's gay adventure, which we've discussed ad nauseum, so I'm going to skip over that part. But they do indicate an interesting change, which is at the end of that, Bill committed suicide at the end of episode 3, which did not happen in the game, because that denied the opportunity for the characters to actually meet. It denied Joel and Ellie the opportunity in the show to meet Bill. So that is a meaningful change, definitely. And as they point out in the article, fans who were disappointed by that, oh, you killed off Bill before Joel and Ellie could meet him, that's written off as just, well, they're just homophobes. They just don't like it because it's a gay love story. So while Bill and his partner were originally depicted as gay, David and James were never shown to have any Christian leanings. This suggests that the writers of the show intentionally and meticulously chose to give them a new religious bent in order to smear Christian beliefs. I mean, I don't know if I agree with that take that it was deliberate to smear. I mean, certainly within the realm of possibility. What I think is that Christians are an easy target. They're a safe target, Number one, it's a cliche. The cult-like pastor leading his flock like a Pied Piper, that is a cliche, and it's easy to reach for. Secondly, making fun of Christians is safe. There are certain other Abrahamic religions that you would never portray in this way. I'm just saying. So they're a target of opportunity. So I don't know that I agree it was deliberate, but it could have been. Could have been. This theory, he's going to defend his theory here. This theory receives even more support at the episode's conclusion. While its main event does mirror Ellie and David's fatal showdown in the game, it adds one last insult to injury by not only having David attempt to rape Ellie, but also cite the verse 1 John 4:18, "There is no fear in love," as his justification for doing so. Of course, in the game, David never actually tried to sexually assault Ellie, much less use the Bible as an excuse to commit such a vile act. But that won't matter to casual audiences. To them, this disrespectful depiction of the cannibals as a primarily Christian group will unfortunately be the only one that they know. And you know what? He makes a good point there in defense of his argument that this was intentional, that like the showrunner deliberately undertook, to call that out. So what do you think? Was this intentional? Or is this a target of opportunity? But what I will say is it's interesting to me, having not seen the game. I would never have known that like these were not Christians in the video game. I would have assumed, because it's a major part of the plot. Like it's a major part of these characters. I suppose I'm being a bit charitable here, but I suspect that number one, there's a lot of anti-Christian sentiment generally in Hollywood. And number two, they're just a target of opportunity. It's easy. Oh, we need a cult leader. Who could we portray as a cult leader? And they kind of reach for the David Koresh kind of, they just go for that, right? It's like they could have made them some other kind of cult. They could have made them any other religion. They could have made them Orthodox Jews. They didn't choose to do that. Could have made them Muslims. They didn't do that. No. Now, that being said, Christians are the majority. They're a target of opportunity. It's just what it is. So, Janie says, a shockingly large number of U.S. products are unable to be sold in Europe because of banned chemicals. Totally agree. Fu Man Blue said, I read that one. Polo Surf says, if you could write a sequel for any movie, which one would it be? Or an episode for any show. Sequel for any movie. I would write a sequel to Titanic. I want to see what happens next. I want to see the next voyage. No, I'm just kidding. Sequel to any movie. Terminator 2. Terminator 2. I think it can be done. I think Terminator sequels could work. I'm not saying it wouldn't be damn hard. I think that just by their nature, the Terminator stories are kind of formulaic, and that's part of their problem. But like, okay, Terminator Salvation. I thought that was the first time I thought this is a smart idea. Forget about all the time travel crap. Let's just do a John Connor in the future fighting the Revolution story. I liked it for two reasons. Number one, Christian Bale's in it. Number two, I never fully bought into the idea of John Connor as the savior of humanity. I always felt like something about the kid didn't sell me on it. But that wasn't necessarily a problem because obviously the whole point of the story is this is before he became the legend. And that's part of the fun of it. Is like heroes come from unlikely places. That's a cool idea. That's a very smart storytelling idea that like John Connor is an unlikely hero. That, there's nothing inherently special about him. And I think that's probably true of a great many leaders in history that are considered great people. It's like they kind of came from nowhere. They were needed in a moment of crisis and they stepped up. And so for me, I've always enjoyed that part of the John Connor myth. That being said, Terminator 3 made him an absolute pussy. Let's just be honest. Like, I really disliked Nick Stahl's portrayal of John Connor in Terminator 3. That whole movie was dumb. The TX was dumb. There was no emotional heart in that movie. I did kind of like the ending, although it was bleak. I did kind of like that, it's Judgment Day and it's happening and we never could have stopped it. There's a dark part of me that kind of likes that, but it wasn't a good movie. It was shit. And again, my big problem was John Connor, who is now an adult. He is now an adult man, and he's been trained to be a badass by his mother, and he's even got some battle experience because he helped with the Cyberdyne heist. So there is no reason for John Connor in Terminator 3 not to be a freaking badass. He should be shooting those things. He should know their weaknesses. His shot should be hitting. He should not be, oh my God, they're coming. What do we do? And Arnold Schwarzenegger stuffs him in a coffin. Give me a freaking break. Garbage. So yeah, I was excited about the prospect of seeing John Connor in the future, the legend, doing what he does best, laying down the law and kicking some metal, kicking some bullet heads right in the teeth, you know, taking out some skin jobs. Yeah, I was all for it. And that movie was garbage. That movie was shit. And you know what? The worst part about it was the Terminators in Salvation. What they do is they throw John Connor across. You know, all a Terminator has to do to kill you, this is all they have to do to kill you. And you're dead. That's it. Literally all the tension in the end of the first Terminator film is that all that dismembered machine has to do is get one hand on Sarah Connor and she's dead. One hand on her and she's dead. That's the tension of the entire scene. And what do they do in all these dumb movies? The Terminator, they pick him up and they throw him across the room so that they can get up, squirm around and find their gun, try again, and then they throw him again. And it's like, oh, come on. Number one, they wouldn't even survive that in real life. You wouldn't even survive being thrown by a machine into a car. Nobody's going to survive that. But it looks survivable in a movie. So that's what they do. And it's dumb. The whole plot was stupid. I can't even hardly remember half of the plot for Salvation. And it was so disappointing to me. So disappointing. And then Genesis, don't even get me started. That thing was a nightmare. Boy, way to misunderstand literally every element of what made the Terminator 1 and 2 films so good. Literally, way to misunderstand absolutely every level of what made Terminator a good story with Terminator Genesis, and then wreck it all. It was garbage. And then Terminator Dark Fate, which I thought might be good because James Cameron was nominally attached to it. And then honestly, the worst thing for me about Dark Fate was it was just repeating the same story a third time. It was like, oh, savior of humanity. And yes, I know they gender swapped the savior of humanity and all that stuff. And there's plenty of cringe in it. There were actually some good action scenes in Terminator Dark Fate, though. I will give it that. There were some action scenes that were good. But I think it could work. And I don't think you'd have to totally stick to the formula. I think it could even be a time travel story. But I'd like to try it, not as a time travel story. I would like to try a story that advances it somehow. I would even suggest... Okay, this was always my theory about how Kyle Reese could be John Connor's father, even though he had to travel back in time to father John Connor, because that's a time paradox. Like, how's that possible? My theory was always that they had already changed the timeline like 20 times by that point. And so what was actually happening was this was a changed timeline of a changed timeline of a changed timeline, which is how that paradox was possible. So maybe a good third film would be to explain the first cycle that started it. Do I have the skill as a writer to pull that off? I'm not saying I do, but I would try. If I had a shot, I'd give it my best. I really would. It's a great question, Polasurf. Thank you for that. Thanks, Polasurf. He says, I'm sure you can write a fantastic Terminator movie. Well, you're probably giving me too much credit, but I would give it my best. That's all I could promise. I know what's wrong with the bad ones. I will tell you that much. Janie says, thing is, though, it's so lame and lazy to use religion, especially Christianity, because to develop a real reason for the cannibals is way scarier. Yeah, and actually, the actual character that plays the leader of this cannibalistic cult, like his kind of reasons for everything are super cool, I think. And you could have done all of that without the Christianity piece. And really, in the story, it's just that he's using Christianity. He doesn't believe in any of it. He just is using it to control people. And it's like, oh, gee, that's never been done. So yeah, I would have been more interested in maybe he controls people just through, this is the reality, is human beings, all you got to do, this is how these cult leaders operate. When you give desperate people hope, that can, manipulative, psychopathic people can abuse that. They can absolutely abuse that. And that does not require religion. It doesn't require any specific religion. That's a mind virus. The mind virus is, you're exploiting a vulnerability in someone. And so you don't need to insert. So yeah, the fact that the Christianity had no part of the video game story tells me this is deliberate. Like, there was Bill and Frank did not get a whole entire story in the Last of Us game, and yet they turned their third episode into a total departure from the main story to do a gay love story. A couple episodes later, they depart once again from the main narrative to adapt the DLC that retconned Ellie into a lesbian. And they devote a whole episode to not just a lesbian romance, a boring as fuck lesbian romance. It was boring. It was CW Harlequin romance drivel. It was not interesting, and it was horribly acted. And guess what? In the DLC with the lesbian romance, it is interspersed, it is intercut with the fact that Ellie is on a badass mission in the present day to ransack a mall that's full of zombies to steal the medical supplies she needs for Joel. Now tell me that's not a better story right there. Right? So this show's crap. This show is garbage. And, and believe me, if you like it, no disrespect to you, I'd actually, and I mean this seriously, I would be interested in hearing your defense of the show because I can't see what anyone sees in it. I see that there's quality writing in it. I'm not denying that there's competent writers at work here. It is a woke show. That is my verdict on this. It is a woke show, and it's a stealth woke show because it is, most woke writers are idiots. Most woke writers are dumbass hacks with zero talent that are writing for Jimmy Kimmel and the Oscars, and they get pulled into a writer's room to be the fall guy. That's what most woke writers are. It turns out that they actually found a couple of woke writers that have some talent to write The Last of Us. And so there's enough actual talented character work and writing in this show that it takes a minute for you to figure out it's woke. I know. I'm sure some of you sailors and star nuts were screaming, when I was giving it the benefit of the doubt. They're duping you. They're doing it again. I know. They do it every time. Believe me, it's always in the back of my mind. I admit. Polo Surf says, I suppose the reason is, the lack of food. Human cannibalism can be ethical. Oh, man. Are you going to pick that hill to die on? Well, of course. The Donner Party. Obviously in extreme circumstances, but that's not what they're doing in this show. Trust me. That's not what this episode was about. Squire Tom says, the episode may have been more interesting if they didn't make the preacher an evil rapist and just a conflicted human trying to lead people. I totally agree. If they had just made him more of a conflicted human, as Tom suggests, trying to lead people in desperate times, that's more interesting, I think. And that's kind of what it started out to be. And they did have a thread in it about how he had been a teacher in his past life, and he had struggled with his violent urges, and we know what we're hinting at there. And it's like, I think you could have kept that, and that was kind of interesting. I think it was more interesting if it was an urge he had never acted upon. Like, he had homicidal instincts when he was in normal civilization as a teacher, and now he's in the apocalypse, and he's found a way that his homicidal instincts are actually feeding people that are starving, and he's helping them, and they don't have to know the dirty little details. And so in his warped view of things, there was a reason for him to have this terrible, darkness in him. And I think that's pretty interesting. And unfortunately, the episode kind of ruins all that at the end. So I agree with you, Tom. I think they really sacrificed. It was just too irresistible. The woke can't help themselves. They can't help themselves. It's like, oh, strong male, vulnerable female, me too. This is another opportunity to have women being abused by toxic masculinity. They just can't help themselves, folks. They just can't. It's like, putting a Twinkie in front of a 5-year-old and leaving the room, and telling them, if you don't eat the Twinkie, I will give you 2 when I come back. And that Twinkie's going to be gone. You better believe it. They can't help themselves. The woke are the same way. It's like, if you just hold back this one time on the toxic masculinity story, this is going to be a great story. And you can even still imply the toxic masculinity that can still kind of be there because, he already hinted that he was a teacher with homicidal or violent, he says violent urges. There's enough there that your message of maybe there's something there could still be implied. The audience could still read it into it, but they can't help themselves. It's like, no, we got to go the full Monty. We got to go the full Me Too movement episode here, and we can't help it. And this is why I hate groupthink in general, and me being a libertarian, I fall on the right side of things, but I am by no means a conservative. I just don't agree with conservatives on a lot of things. And I will say that, I feel the exact same way about like specifically Christian films. And I understand wanting to make films to compete with woke Hollywood. I understand wanting to have films that are positive about Christianity. But a lot of these Christian films I see, they're literally made for the audience who goes to church every Sunday. And there's not a lot of actual complexity or nuance in some of these stories. And look, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, everybody has different ways of getting their entertainment, and if they serve the purpose, they serve. But if you want to tell a openly, unabashedly Christian story, and have it reach a wide audience, it's got to be a good story. That's just how it is. Propaganda in any form is not interesting. It doesn't make for good storytelling. I don't care if it's, a bunch of whacked out leftist drivel or well-meaning Christian proselytizing. If that is your purpose for writing, yeah, I mean, take your shot, but I'm not going to watch it, most likely, because it's not going to be that interesting. It's going to be, So no disrespect, because I understand the reasons, Christians these days, and believe me, I had my angry at Christians years, so I'm not painting myself as, I had my years of being a rabid, foaming at the mouth atheist, and I've come to appreciate what Christians were, the things I was arguing with Christians about back then. I'm starting to see they had a point. They had a point. And really that's owing to the woke being so goddamn evil. They are so freaking evil at this point. It's unbelievable. The evil shit they do to people, and then they turn right around and say, oh, it's because you're doing all that to us. It's like, you started this. It's just like that debate with Eric July and Angry Joe. And I'm not saying Angry Joe is evil. I'm just saying what he said was freaking evil. He said, oh, look at this pedo and this racist, these two pedos and racists. And then he is the victim when Eric July says, I'm going to want to have a word with you in person about this. How dare you? And his reaction to that is like, oh, wow, see, look at how evil you and all your followers are. It's like, dude, you just accused someone of two, not one, but two heinous, evil things. And you feel you deserve no accountability for that. Like, fuck off, man. Seriously. So, the woke have woken me up to the fact that the materialistic view of the universe is very limiting. And you know what it leads to? It leads to depression. It leads to a worship of ugliness. It leads to believing that you are the center of the universe and that you should never have to listen to anyone that disagrees with you about anything because you're already right and you already know what's right. It is a worship of youth and a revulsion towards age and wisdom. Although it is also a worship of complete contradictions all the time. It is an absolute lack of ability to be consistent on a single principle whatsoever. So and where did all that come from? It came from a view that there is no God, there is no actual higher power in the universe, there is no reason why we're actually here. There is no actual, we are just here. That is a recipe for believing that anything goes. And I hated that argument in my 20s. And I know the arguments against it. But what I have realized is that here's the deal. Human beings did not know there was such a thing as germs as recently as a couple hundred years ago. And we've been on this planet for 200,000 years. So that means that for like 99.9% of all the time humans have been alive, they didn't even know germs existed, much less atoms, much less a universe. They thought those stars were something totally else. They weren't. So what does that tell you? That tells you that we don't know shit. We still don't know shit. The worst thing that humans ever convinced themselves of was that we figured everything out with science. It's like, believe me, there is so much we don't know. And what I realized is the worship of science, and I'm a scientist, I believe in science, I believe in the scientific method, but believing that therein lies all the answers we need, that's a woeful mistake. And so watching the absolute detestable behavior of the woke has clued me into all of that. Watching watching how that way of thinking has turned them all into monsters that they themselves were once trying to fight, essentially. I'm not even denying that there aren't some good reasons for some of the intentions that started a lot of this nonsense. Like wanting to end racism is at its core a noble aspiration. Wanting to correct historical injustices is not in and of itself a bad thing. That is a noble aspiration. But look at the heinousness it's given rise to. That comes from believing there's no meaning in the universe and yet searching for it, because we need meaning. We need meaning. We have to have it. And that's why the woke are they're so contradictory all the time, because they are bereft of meaning and they're grasping for it. They're reaching for it. They are desperate for it. And they'll deny it all day long. They'll get angry at you if you suggest it, but they desperately want it. And they think they have found it in this bizarre ideology they have. But you notice anger is really a form of pain. Anger is a form of actual emotional pain. And usually what's below anger is fear. And the sheer foaming at the mouth rage that comes from the woke is a sign to me that they're in a lot of pain. And they know deep down that some of the things they're doing and saying are wrong. And they're defending that with their anger. And so that's what you do. You double down. That's what you do. That was a long tangent, but I'm behind on the chat. I'm not doing the slow chat yet, but the channel is growing. We are halfway to 1,000 sailors and star nuts. So click that like and subscribe button. I know I need to get better at promoting myself. And I was asked on the last stream, how could we support you? And I didn't have a good answer for that. And I do today. So my goal is to build up a locals community. And so if you check the link in the description below, if you would like to, certainly nothing is expected, but if you would like to support the channel, you can just follow for free the locals page. And I'm working on doing stuff with that. That's my plan. But if you would like to support the channel in a membership way, you can do that on locals. So it's swordsandstarships.locals.com. And that's in the description. So just thought I'd throw that out there. Janie says, some tribes believed eating the dead empowered them with their enemy's power. Some believed the consumption was a way to keep a family ancestor alive, or Dahmer, Lecter, possession, obsession. Oh, Janie, always taking it to a dark place there. I love it. I love it. Polo Surf says, I was so excited when Sam Raimi was announced as a producer for a Telu movie back in the day, but they decided to chop it into an 8-part half-assed product. Could have made an outstanding 150-minute movie. Like, I don't mind 8 hours of Telu in the slightest. Do you mean the game or the show? I mean, I agree with you on... Well, yeah, of course you mean the show, because the game is like 50 hours of gameplay, probably. Yeah, I agree that I used to get so excited when I would hear like 4 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I guess, if I had heard that Daredevil was coming back, I'd have been over the moon. I would have been over the moon. But back then I was plugged into the Matrix and I didn't know what was going to happen. I was okay. I was starting to wake up at that point. But when Star Trek Picard was announced, I was cautiously optimistic. I was excited. When Patrick Stewart came out on that Comic-Con stage, or it was a con of some kind, I forget which one, and he said, because he had kind of been done with the character, and he said, I'm going to come back to this character because he's meant to be a hopeful character, and TNG gave people hope, and he's right about that, and I want to do that, and I want to come back. And I thought, and I got excited. And then he said, because in this day and age, what we need is hope, especially in this environment. And it was like, this was in the 2016 era, and it's like, oh, okay, it's TDS. Patrick Stewart has TDS. Great. So that's what I'm in for. So I was like, but maybe he won't be that much in control. Maybe Patrick Stewart will just be saying the lines, Little did I know that Alex Kurtzman and Akiva Goldsman, fucking parasites that they are, were going to gut everything I ever loved about TNG. And I know everybody has their worst franchise destruction of all time. That one's mine. Dear Sailors. That is the most, I know for Gary on Nerdrotic, because I'm not a Doctor Who guy. I've never been into Doctor Who, but I love listening to him talk about the Timeless Children, episode that just gutted the whole Doctor Who mythos. And I have no clue how, because I just don't know the lore. But when I hear him talk about it, I know exactly what that feels like, because I'm like, Star Trek Picard ruined everything. And then season 3 is a total 180. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable that they could even turn that around in so far as they have. And what's amazing about it is that Patrick Stewart, he sounded like he was dying in both of the first 2 seasons. I literally was afraid for his health watching it, because he's like, oh, Robbie, I need a ship because I have to go. The Borg, we have to Soji. And I'm like, God, this man should not be acting. He's having a heart attack. Jesus. But what's amazing is you put a good writer on the show, and I swear to God, Patrick Stewart in season 3 is able to get close to sounding like his old self again. Close. Not there. Trust me, he's old. He's old as dirt. But he can, I swear to God, it gave me chills. In episode 2 of this show, understand this. He never once had one moment of command in season 1 and 2. Not one. He was a doddering old man, and it was elder abuse. He was being yelled at and shamed and humiliated for 2 full seasons. So you have to understand, this is my mindset going in. They had him literally hide behind the captain's chair in season 2, episode 1. He hides behind the captain's chair. Fuck. So imagine this moment in the end of spoilers for episode 2, season 3 of Picard. I'm not going to spoil a lot, just kind of the last little payoff. But I'm going to leave most of it unspoiled. But I'll just say there is this moment when he realizes what's at stake, and there's a battle. There's kind of a battle in the offing. And the question is, do we run or do we fight? And there's this debate. The captain of the ship doesn't want to fight. He wants to run. And 500 lives are at stake. Everything's at stake. And really, Picard has been losing the argument the whole episode, because technically he's retired, so he doesn't have any actual authority. But there's this moment where he realizes that something very personal to him is at stake. And it's amazing. He communicates this just with his face. And then he turns around and he goes, engage! And he executes a battle command, and it's epic, and he means it. And it's like, he's back. Look at what good writing can do. It's unreal. I never would have believed it was possible. I'm dead serious about that. So yeah, I used to be excited too. Polo Surf. Tom says, with some Earl Grey tea. Yeah, has he drank? He hasn't drank any Earl Grey yet, so far as I've seen. I have to watch tonight's episode. I haven't seen it yet, so... Polo Surf says, Raimi got beaten into a pulp back when Doctor Strange 2 got mutilated. Dude, I will tell you this. And Polo Surf goes on to say, he had the desire to make the scariest MCU movie of all time. So magic seems like a really bummed out surrender. I loved some of the elements of Doctor Strange Mom. I liked Dead Strange with all the creepy, like the dark cape of evil spirits. That was freaking rad. There were moments in that where you saw what it could have been. There were moments when you saw that this could have actually been a really super cool story. And Doctor Strange, I kind of am not a big magic guy. I don't like magic a lot. And magic in superheroes, I really hate. I hated all the magic characters in the comics. Whenever a magic character came into a Spider-Man comic, I hated it. So, but I did kind of warm up to it in the first Doctor Strange movie, because he goes through the whole thing of learning it, the secret arts, and fine. I can live with it. And there were some really tantalizing things in that of like, oh, we're harnessing these extra dimensional energies that most people don't understand. And I thought, well, that's a cool way of getting at it, because it kind of puts, in theory, some rules, some limits on it. It kind of implies that there's rules to it. And that just went all out the window in the next Doctor Strange. But they just, there's no rules. They need a sling ring. They don't need a sling ring. They have a sling ring. They don't have a sling ring. They can cut things in half. They can warp things, or they can't warp things, or they can wave their hands and things move away. or they can just fall off a building and have to be caught by a cape. And it's like, there's no rhyme or reason to any of this garbage. I don't know what any of this stuff can do or can't do. It's extremely boring. I just, so yeah, it's a big missed opportunity. Raimi could have made it work. Totally agree with that. Yeah. So Janie says, Tom, you can literally see the cut lines of Raimi's work because that was the only part of them worth watching. Polo Surf says, that's heartbreaking. Probably responding to something I said. I don't remember. Fu Man Blue says, yeah, Sam looks so dejected in all the interviews. Oh, that is heartbreaking. That's what you're talking about. Yeah, that is heartbreaking. Yeah, poor Sam Raimi. He got done dirty. See, that's the thing, and I think, this is one of the reasons, too, why Disney is failing, is because the talent is starting to wise up. The talent is starting to figure out the game, and the game is you're the fall guy. You are there to launder the woke algorithmic storytelling. That is your purpose. Your name, Mr. Raimi, is on the billing so that you're laundering the dirty storytelling. Right? It's a storytelling laundering operation. I'm going to coin that term. And so they are laundering garbage storyline through good names and through what used to be good CGI and talented effects people. Lucasfilm was the gold standard for effects. George Lucas built Industrial Light and Magic. George Lucas built THX. George Lucas created the special effects industry that made Star Trek all the things in Star Trek possible. So imagine how they have used those good names to launder their garbage through the system. And now the talent's starting to wise up because I hear, little things like Chris Hemsworth saying, I'm not that interested in coming back, or I don't know, it depends on who's directing it. And you're starting to get rumblings of like Peter Jackson kind of being like, I'm not that interested in watching Rings of Power. It's like they're starting to figure out that that they're being used to the extent that they're ever involved. And it's part of why Disney is starting to resort to hiring Jimmy Kimmel. Right. Just let that sink in. The man writing the next Avengers film. Best known for Jimmy Kimmel Live and the Oscars. As the drinker would say, fuck off, film. Yes. Polosurf says, what you drinking, Tom? Yeah, what are you drinking, Tom? Janie says, ooh, I think we should have a binge card for Garrett's show. Tom says, nothing fun. You're drinking tea is what I'm guessing. Polosurf says, oh, brother, the magic of good writing. You are so right about that. It will turn water into wine. It will turn carbon into diamonds. I don't want to torture that metaphor. Janie, same. We could take swigs of red dye number 5 when he goes off on a tangent. Tom, from our toxic plastic cups. With rainforest destroying paper straws, says Janie. Polosurf says that little bit of witch with the flickering pictures and cupped oceans was just a taste of epic horror movie that had one scare per frame. Yeah, in Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, there were these little hints of what could have been, these little moments where there was creepy, kind of scary stuff. And by the way, one of the cool things about the first Strange film, and especially in the marketing, it reminded me of Inception, that pretty glorious Christopher Nolan film, Inception, where the buildings were like turning over themselves. So like there were elements of that kind of, that was the way to play it, was you go to Captain America to get, the kind of Wonder Bread hero, but with interesting spy thriller kind of vibes. You go to Iron Man to get the quippy, brilliant genius with all the cool tech. You go to Doctor Strange to get a kind of mind-bending, trippy world of wonders, and it's like Doctor Strange was a kind of Cabinet of Curiosities character. And Raimi, if he could have realized his vision, that's what it would have been. I swear to God, the amnesia about Marvel is unbelievable to me, because I am not shitting you. In 2012, 2013, 14, I remember the mainstream critics hated Marvel. Rotten Tomatoes, they would just bag, even when they were praising a film, like they would be praising, Civil War, for example, they would whine about the fact that it was connected to the Avengers. They'd whine about it. They'd be like, this could have been such a smart Jason Bourne style hero, but because it's saddled with having to be part of Avengers, we have to get all these leaden references, and it really constrains the artistic vision, and it's really a bad way of storytelling. And I hated him for that, because I was like, get out of the, let me have my fun. I'm enjoying the fact that my superheroes are finally playing together. I'm enjoying that. Can I just enjoy that for a while? Now it's the total opposite. They're ruining it. They're ruining every single story. And I've got to listen to the same critics saying, oh my gosh, Wakanda Forever is so brilliant and it's changing lives. And I love how, and I can't wait to see how it's going to contribute to the next Avengers movie. And I'm like, you have got to be shitting me. You people literally exist to hate everything nerds love. Everything nerds love, they exist to hate. It's unbelievable. They're the most snooty, up their own asshole people. Yeah, so anyway, poor Sam Raimi. He got hosed. He got done dirty. Polosurf says $200 million worth of ghouls and cobwebs and whatever the hell they please to unleash. JD Mac says that impression is a double shot. Polosurf says, just imagine that trippy sequence from the first one. Get Sam Raimi to add some monsters and make it for 2 hours. Oh, yeah. Like, that could have been super cool. Just let him go full Evil Dead. And they could have done that in the old days of Marvel. They could have, because look at Daredevil. I showed you that still of Punisher with blood on him and a bunch of dead bodies in a prison who were trying to shank him. It's not comic book violence in that episode, by the way. It is a real prison is how it's presented. These are real bad dudes with shivs. And their job is to kill him. And there's like 10 of them. And he kills every freaking one of them. It's plausible. The way it looks, you can believe it. And the best part of it is that John Bernthal's performance, without words, remember that in good acting? John Bernthal communicates when this is all going down. He knows he's going to die because you see in his eyes that, he's good, but he ain't that good. And he knows it. And he knows he's going to die. But he's still going to try, and he still kills them all. That's what made it so great, is that even this like epic special forces legend who's so effective, even he knows there's only so much he can do. But he's so determined, he's just going to give it his best shot. And he's so freaking good, he just barely manages to kill them all and survive. Barely. And it's bloody and violent, and it's brutal. They can never do that now. And it's like, and look at the cost of that. Every Guardians of the Galaxy unintentionally broke, I think, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Because once it worked to make everything a quip and a joke all the time, and it could work, I think the bean counters in the corporate, that's it. That's what the folks want. They want funny. They don't want sad. They don't want violent. Well, look, it's accounting. These are corporate people. They want money. But this is the thing. This is the balance between art and business has always been a tug of war. But the reality is, you just cannot only write for numbers. I've made this mistake as a creative. I got stuck in a way of thinking for a couple of years where my writing was only a profession to me. It was I'm only doing this, or, well, it's not only doing it. It's more like my goal is to make money doing this. And that is the mindset I must have. And I must have a business mindset. And I became a bean counter for myself. And it made writing miserable, and it made me miserable. And what I've realized is you have to have a balance. It's like, if you're just doing it for fun and it's a hobby, that's one thing. But if you want to do it professionally, you have to have a professional business mindset. Show up to work, even when you don't feel like it, put in the work, do what you say you're going to do. And on the other hand, make sure you're having fun. Make sure you're writing characters you love writing. And if you don't have a balance of those two things, it's going to fail. And the problem that we have is that these bean counters at Marvel's, they think they have the magic formula, and they're strangling the golden goose. They're strangling it to death. Polosurf says, absolute glory. Sam Raimi invites you to IMAX 3D Doom. Perhaps Raimi thought he was sly and he could hijack the product. But that's what's so baffling, is that they fired Derrickson for wanting to lean into horror direction, then Disney hires Sam Raimi. That, maybe they liked the idea that Sam Raimi could make it kind of light. I mean, Sam Raimi did have Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 1. Well, Spider-Man 1 through 3, but Spider-Man 2 for a long time was widely regarded as one of the best superhero films of all time. And with good reason, rare to pull off a good superhero sequel. I think once we got into Marvel Phase 1, they kind of figured it out, but you can see it's hard to do a sequel to a superhero. And if you'd like a little inside baseball, there's a reason for this in storytelling. The origin story of a superhero is a natural hero's journey because they must discover their power, they must hone their power, they must also grapple with the moral questions of having such a power, and they must understand how to use it. And so there's a natural progression of the story in a hero's origin story that fits the hero's journey. Problem is, in the second film, it's over. That hero's journey is over. They have the power, they are the superhero, and they are the conquering hero. Now where do they go? And the problem that a lot of superhero sequels fall into is they tell the wrong story. They tell a story that does not actually give the character a journey, and so they just wind up being underwhelming. And Spider-Man 2 did not fall prey to that. Spider-Man 2 had a great storyline about Peter. He's learned to be Spider-Man, but now he's starting to learn, but how can I be Spider-Man and still have a life? And that was kind of his journey in that story. And he was torn. He was torn between love and responsibility. And that's a great thing for the character to grapple with throughout the whole film, because in order for a superhero story to really be compelling, we have to relate to them. By the way, not just comic book superheroes are superheroes. You can have Maximus Decimus Meridius of Gladiator, he is a superhero. He is the great, grand, conquering general. He's morally kind of flawless. And he's an excellent fighter. So he is a superhero. It's hard to tell a story about a superhero if you don't give them the right vehicle, meaning the right type of story for them to be in. If they're in the wrong story, it's not going to work. And in the case of Maximus, his story is all of his advantages are taken away from him and he becomes a slave. And to boot, his family is murdered, and so he has a revenge motive. So that is what makes Maximus compelling. His Maximus has a curse, and every superhero must have a curse in order for them to be compelling. And Maximus's curse is that he's too good of a man for Rome, and that's really his curse. If he had just gone back to his farm, he would have been fine. If he could have just followed through and said, you know what, I've done enough war, I've had enough, I'm going home to my family. And when Marcus Aurelius begged him to become the protector of Rome, if he had just said, no, I know, it's the honorable thing to do, but I'm not doing it. I got to go home. I gave you 3 years of my life. I got to go. But then Aurelius hits him with, Rome's going to fall. If you don't do this, Rome is going to sink into ruin, and you're the only man that can save it. Please do this. And Maximus can't help himself. He can't help himself. He's an honorable man, and he must do the honorable thing, and that is his curse. And he loses everything as a result of it. So this is why woke storytelling doesn't work, just to circle back, because in woke storytelling, their purpose is propaganda. And in propaganda, you cannot have flaws. You cannot have curses. The message must always be proven just and virtuous in all ways, and it must never be shown to be weak or flawed. It must never be embarrassed. There must never be embarrassment for anything that serves the message. And so that's why it's terrible storytelling, because they think that it lifts up, they think what's inspiring is to see flawless people that represent your racial or gender or whatever identity. They think what makes you inspired is to see perfect people doing perfect things because they're like you. And it's like, no, because none of us are perfect, and that's not real. That's fake. That's not reality. What inspires us is to see flawed people or people with challenges overcome them and do the right thing when it's not easy to. So, yeah, what else we got? Tom says, I don't know how Raimi could agree to direct a movie basically without a script, as it was written in 2 weeks and rewritten throughout filming. Yeah, and I missed that one. And then Polarsurf was saying maybe he thought he could hijack the product. And it's like, I think they're wise to this trick, I think they know they can't do that anymore. Uh, Forgive me if I mispronounce, but Pramod type is too small. I can't see. I can't read it. Let me get close to the screen. Pramod. Parmani. Parnami. I've mangled it now. I'm a terrible host. I should quit doing this forever. Okay. Pramod Parmani. I welcome you to the chat. Loved your RRR review. Best regards from New Delhi, India. Well, thank you. I'm glad you liked it. I loved the movie. It's reassuring to me to know that, not that I ever had any doubt, don't get me wrong here, but it's just reassuring to me to know that Hollywood does not monopolize storytelling. Like, storytelling is, there are things that work and there are things that don't. And when you do the things that work, it's beautiful. And every time I see a good movie, it reminds me why I love stories. Every time I come out of a theater on a high, it's the best feeling in the world. I love nothing more. Every time I finish a television series and I can't stop thinking about it for weeks, I'm on a high. And it reminds me why I'm so passionate about storytelling, good storytelling, because it connects us to something in ourselves that we've forgotten. There's something in ourselves, a little bit of strength, a little bit of resilience we forgot we had, something we were reaching for that we started to give up on, something in ourselves that we began to believe something wasn't possible, whatever it is. And then you see a great story and it just rekindles it. It's like giving fuel to a fire. And so RRR is a beautiful example of that. It reminds me that it doesn't matter how much bad storytellers and propagandists and authoritarians, for that matter, trash every cultural thing that we have. Like a cleansing fire, a phoenix will rise from the ashes. And sometimes that is an RRR, and sometimes it's a John Wick 4. So, yeah, Raju's the freaking man. Dude, Raju is like 51% of my love of that movie. It's probably more like 75%, honestly, because he's just so friggin' badass. That scene with the stick and he's fighting the crowd, I mean, it was so cool. It was like, this is why I love John Wick, because I love an action scene where the character does things in interesting ways you had never thought of. You would have never thought of, could you actually do that? And it's, pretty cool. All right. Well, I'm going to see what else I got on the dock. We gone a couple hours, so I should probably let you all go, get some sleep. And on a high note, I guess. What do we got? We got well, I would be remiss if I didn't just flash this headline real quick. Arrowverse producer Mark Guggenheim regrets decade spent making DC shows. I really wasted my time. The wages of wokeness, my dear sailors and starnauts, that's what this is. These, call them what you will. SJWs, woke storytellers. I like to also call them propagandists, just propaganda storytellers. They've been living off the fat of the land for quite some time, haven't they? They have won the culture for a while. They have enjoyed their moment in the sun. All their movements were on the ascendant. All their movements were on the rise. All their enemies were being canceled, fired, and crushed. And they could do no wrong. Their worst stories, garbage, awful casting, terrible writing, awful directors, everything they did, they could just shit out whatever they wanted. And the shill media would just, it's so wonderful. There's people of color, and it's so wonderful to see strong female women. And they would just be so happy. And all of their enemies could just be laid low. And all those stupid fans that were unhappy that their franchise had been ruined, well, all those nerds in their basements could just whine about it, and they could just like it. And if they didn't like it, they could just not watch it. And they lived so high on the hog for so long. And you know what? I bet Mr. Mark Guggenheim, he enjoyed it. He enjoyed the fact that he could write all these crap shows with no story, with no effort. He could be lazy, everything. Jordan Peterson has a great quote. He says, "Beware of unearned wisdom." Well, Mr. Guggenheim, beware of unearned writing jobs, because this is what happens. Alongside Andrew Kreisberg and Greg Berlanti, I guess, Greg Berlanti, Mark Guggenheim crafted a shared DC universe that lasted a decade on the CW, though it wavered in quality over time. However, despite the upside of his track record, the producer's phone isn't exactly ringing off the hook with fresh offers. Oh no! He lamented this fact in a blog post. Oh, maybe you'll do good at blogging, which is kind of more like an early 2000s activity, but I digress. That's going viral in entertainment news circles. Well, that's good. Good for you, sir. It's important that you have work, you know. I appreciate that. Guggenheim expresses regret for his tenure at the head of the Arrowverse as it took a turn after the labor that was the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover. The project, a live-action adaptation of a seminal comic book series that made a significant impression on my psyche, was more than a labor of love, he said by Entertainment Weekly. It was a labor in every respect, and a project where I spent every ounce of capital I'd amassed in developing DC Comics-related shows for Warner Brothers over an 8-year period, he continued, adding, I called in every favor. I used every chit. I burned every bridge. I even spent $10,000 of my own money. Well, I will say this. I have respect for that. I respect that. He put in some sweat equity. I'm not denying that. He invested his own money. For all the effort and cost, afterwards, my phone did not, in fact, ring off the hook or otherwise. Wait, did I miss a piece? I feel like I missed a quote in there. Yeah. I feel like there was there's some quote that's missing there. Basically, he thought his phone was going to be ringing off the hook. But anyway, fans loved what we did. No, they didn't, asshole. No, they didn't. This is your problem. This is why your phone's not ringing off the hook. You wrote crap and you were protected by the media and your own echo chamber. And you were not actually allowed to become aware that you were writing garbage. And so, okay, I revoke my sympathy for your stupid $10,000 invest. I fucking revoke everything I just said charitable to you. I called in every favor. I used every chit. I burned every bridge. I spent $10,000 of my own money. I hope you lost $20,000, you dumbass. Unbelievable. It's like fans love what we did. You're a liar. You know that's not true. You can't, unless you're delusional, you can't possibly think people love that show. Batwoman was crap. There were tweets, there were posts, there were memes. Well, that's your first mistake there. The internet is not reality, sir. There was much discussion. Well, there's always lots of discussion when, your woke propaganda is being loved. All of which I was and remain deeply grateful for. Well, gratitude is a good quality to have. He celebrated the love and this is a weird phrase, lack of apathy, but the response was one-sided. That's the writer's words, not his. The fans were impressed, but those in Hollywood weren't, Guggenheim claims, including DC studio heads James Gunn and Peter Safran. Well, James Gunn is a talented writer, sir, so that could be one reason. Their perceived indifference to him is why he took his frustrations public. James Gunn announced that he assembled a writer's room to help chart out what the new DC universe under his and Safran's leadership is going to be. Guggenheim's lament goes on. Suffice it to say, I am not among that group. I am not particularly surprised. In fact, I assumed that they would assemble some kind of brain trust to help facilitate what I hoped would be a vision as ambitious as the DC universe deserves. But I'll be honest, I would have liked to have at least gotten a meeting. What a loser. I can't believe I had sympathy for this guy about 20 seconds ago. He clarified, look, I'm a human, okay? I understand what it's like. I've invested my own money in my writing. It's painful. It's painful to put your life on the line, but it's part of the deal. It's part of the gig. He clarified he isn't begging for a job. This isn't begging for a job, sir. Going into doing interviews with Entertainment Weekly and whining about how you're not getting calls. And how I don't think James Gunn has a good vision, and in my vast credentialed, my glorious tenure as a writer in DC, I would think he'd want my input on what would be good storytelling, even though my show lost money and the CW never made money ever. Like, imagine this guy. I sure think he should have called me. I sure do. This is not begging for a job, so certainly not. I'd only spent 9 years toiling in that vineyard after all. Vineyard? What an elitist. I thought you would have said coal mine. Usually that's what you would say when you use toiling, but whatever. Not including many more years co-writing the Green Lantern movie, a Green Lantern streaming series, and comic books like The Flash, Batman Confidential, Adventures of Superman, and Justice Society of America. All probably garbage because nobody's buying comic books that you guys write anymore, ever. Guggenheim, wait, hold on a second. Okay, did he write that? No, he didn't write that. Maybe he did. Guggenheim declared, a small recognition of what I tried to contribute to the grand tapestry. That's being generous, don't you think? That is the DC universe, but alas. Simply put, the Arrowverse hasn't led to any other gigs, so it feels, at least on a career level, that I really wasted my time. With the CW legacy ending this year, aside from Superman and Lois, his exasperation makes sense. Well, Mr. Guggenheim, drown your sorrows, my friend. You bet on the wrong horse, my friend. You play woke games, you win woke prizes. You lived high on the hog, sir. You lived off the fat of the land. You watched as Gina Carano got fired and comedians got boycotted. You watched as Dave Chappelle got threatened with violence just for doing a comedy stand. And you were so happy to see the right people in the room. You were so happy to see that the good people were winning. And you enjoyed the laurels of all your great writing plaudits. You wrote such epic, wonderful stories that advanced all the messages that all the bigots out there needed to hear. And what could be better than doing all the things you're supposed to do for the state, for the party, for the cause? You gave everything to them. I sympathize with you, Mr. Guggenheim. You gave everything to the party. You gave everything to the message. You deserve your reward. Well, this is your reward. This is your reward. Failure. Your money wasted, your years gone, your phone, as you put it, not ringing off the hook. So, good luck to you, sir. Good luck to you. Polarsurf says, back in the day, the CW verse seemed of incredible potential. With such thin potential, you could have made some incredible story-driven shows. Well, I hear that the Arrow was actually pretty good. The Green Arrow. And, look, I watched the first couple episodes. It wasn't my thing. I just couldn't. I like the Arrow character. I feel like he's a cool character. I kind of like close to the ground superheroes. I kind of like street level superheroes. I like the ones where their abilities are more their skill than their actual superpowers. I kind of enjoy those. And so Arrow really appealed to me. But it's just the CW it was too silly for me. But that being said, I did watch Smallville, so I can't really exactly judge anyone's choices there. I watched Smallville. I like Smallville. But it had its problems, believe me. Of course, I was in high school at the time, so I guess I was a little more tolerant of the CW style back then. That being said, I'll bet the Arrow show now is like poetry compared to what they write these days. So probably it deserves a second look. Polarsurf goes on to say, easily make an HBO out of CW. Christ's sake. Yeah, they could. They could do it. Daredevil proves it, because what they're doing to Daredevil is they're doing the reverse. Like, Daredevil was a great, gritty, epic, true to the character, ground level, just knife fight superhero. And excellent. Absolutely excellent. And Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin, by the way, my favorite supervillain ever portrayed in live action is Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin. Maybe Heath Ledger's Joker is a close second, but who else? Who else could possibly be my favorite? I'm probably not thinking of someone, but those two would be my top two. And Vincent D'Onofrio. And I'll tell you exactly what it was, too. It was that he was so, his performance, but he was this big-ass bully. He was this big-ass bully who fought like a kid that's a bully in a schoolyard, and I loved it. And most of his ability to succeed was that he was just kind of indestructible physically, as much as you could be as a big guy. But the second piece of it was his vulnerability. It was the fact that deep down inside there was this abused, bullied kid himself. Damn, that was great. Favorite character. Take that, and they ruined him in Hawkeye. They utterly destroyed him in Hawkeye. And it wasn't even like they like Jake Skywalkered him exactly. It was more that he was just bland. He was just boring. It was like he was there and he threw some punches and he got beat. It's like, okay, you've lost the entire soul of what made that character interesting. I mean, there's a whole scene in Daredevil where he goes to this art gallery and he's staring at a painting. He's this man of absolute unbridled violence, but he's also refined and sophisticated in how he dresses and his tastes. And he goes and he sits in this art gallery and he's staring at a painting. And the woman she's a beautiful woman that's the curator of the gallery comes over and starts explaining the painting to him. And they have this conversation about what he likes about the painting and what it makes him feel. And I just remember, that's a good villain. That is a great villain. A villain that's curious, that makes you curious about them. And they took all of that away from him in Hawkeye. They took all of that away from him. And they're going to do that in the new Daredevil series. So what they've done is they've taken what was an epic, gritty character and they've CW'd him into what the CW is, which is superficial storytelling. So you're exactly right, Polosurf, that CW could have had the same characters be like the Daredevil original Netflix show. Get some coked up YouTube VFX gurus for cheap dirt. Get great writers, get talented amateurs, get some passion going for less, and have them basically do kind of their own fan CW show. Like, that could be cool. I hope that guy's okay, though. Thin budget. I hope that guy's okay. Who would that be? Vincent D'Onofrio? Something I didn't hear about? Okay. Get some comic book writers into screenwriting. They're already underpaid. Absolutely. And Eric July is doing that. Like with ISOM, he's overpaying his people. And by the way, as a business person, that's smart. Pay your people more than they're worth. You know? Polosurf says, some passionate amateur filmmakers looking to prove themselves, get the fans working, improve the paradigm. Low-budget networks are sitting in a cultural goldmine. I agree. You know, this is, you know, look, at the end of the day, we wax dramatic about the fall of Disney and the Marvel Cinematic Universe and all this nonsense. I mean, yes, the SJW woke mind virus is a big factor, but honestly, you know, executives with no creative vision strangling the golden goose, that's a story as old as time. I mean, that goes back to silent movie era. It's just a reality. There's business people and then there's artists. And by the way, it goes the other direction too. There's whacked out artists who have no sense of like how to actually restrain themselves. Taika Waititi comes to mind. Taika Waititi is a perfect example of that. He is the artist who needs a bean counter to rein him in, you know? And so it's a delicate balance. And when too much of the weight shifts to one side or the other, you get garbage. And what's happened with Marvel is everything has shifted over to the bean counters. There's no art to it anymore. The artistic life of the MCU has been sucked out of it completely. Even the comedy, there was an art form. I used to defend the comedy in Marvel Cinematic Universe. I used to defend it. We're talking phase 1 and 2 here, though. And I defended it because I felt that even in like a war movie, the soldiers will make jokes about things because that's how humans cope with things. That being said, it was cleverly written back then. It was actually well-written comedy, and it usually wasn't meta. It usually wasn't making fun of the characters too much. I mean, there was the occasional line, which was, Tony Stark would point out something about a character that was ridiculous, like, doth thou mother know you weareth her drapes, to Thor? Like, I thought that was funny. But I felt like it was in universe enough that it wasn't taking me out of it, right? And now they can't even write that. Like, Ant-Man Quantumania, you know, at least in Doctor Strange, there were a few quips that were kind of funny. And you're like, yeah, they can still do a funny joke. It's even worse now, because, like, Quantumania, like, these jokes were embarrassing. Like the holes joke, oh my God. I meant it when I said I wanted to crawl under my chair. I wanted out of the theater during that joke. It was the weirdest grossest, awkward thing I've ever heard in a Marvel Cinematic Universe. And you could tell that the movie and the writers thought it was so funny. They just thought it was so funny. And it's like, that ain't funny, bro. Like, that is dumb as hell. And it's freaking awkward, by the way. And then the red goo thing. Jesus. I mean, 12-year-olds are funnier than this. You know? So, yeah. Janie says, hey, Polo, help me find a MAGA artist gang on the cheap. Okay. Polosurf says, I mean, those shows would make a killing. I have a theory that there's some obscure foreign publishing house working on a comic book cinematic universe as though it were made by A24 cheap incredibly. Polosurf says, good and sharp. You know, there's some really interesting things happening in Indian cinema, Tollywood, Bollywood. I think they're kind of working on this. I think they're working on creating, because there was that film, it didn't do quite as well as RRR. I forget what it's called, but it was a superhero film recently that did pretty well. And I should probably actually see it and review it, since we do have some Indian sailors and star nuts interested in Indian cinema, so I should check that one out. The reason I didn't know is because the reviews weren't quite as good as RRR, but there's potential there because like there's such a rich mythology, especially with like Hindu mythology. I feel like there's, you know, I would love to see some of those creatives creating something out of that and making that, I think, because that's something we haven't seen before. I mean, the biggest problem with Hollywood is they don't make anything new. They make nothing new. I mean, culturally, it's like being in a dying civilization. You know, it's a civilization that's bereft of ideas or inspiration. Like Disney, why is Disney Disney? Disney is Disney because of Snow White, because of Sleeping Beauty, because of The Lion King. They made new, incredible things, lovingly, handcrafted. They can't do that anymore. Disney is no longer what made it Disney. They can't make new things. Think about that. Imagine, I would hate myself if I were an executive at Disney. I would enjoy the money. I won't deny that, but I would hate myself. Because listen, I've done things that made me more money than I'm making now and hated myself. And there are things that just ain't worth it in life. And I would hate myself if I were a Disney executive. You know why? Because I would be presiding over that. I'd be presiding over nothing new. I would know that every single effort, every day I went to work, my only goal is to, what corpse property of ours can I dig up today and get it, you know, redress it, get it going again, get it out there working, get out there back on the street, make me some money. What property can I pimp out? That would be my job. And I'd have to sit in all these boring meetings all the time, you know, going through Excel spreadsheets. Well, we had 40% more jokes in this one, and we had 3 more minorities in this one than we had last time, and we made X more dollars. Oh, God. I'd hate myself. It'd be the worst existence. Worst. Watch a lot of free domain full movies available on YouTube. Yeah, I should check those out, you know. That's one of the things is it's hard to get clips for reviews. Also, I have to solve this camera. My camera's lagging. I hate that. Don't worry. As the channel grows, I will upgrade equipment. I will get graphics and intros, and I have lots of plans for it. So, all right, sailors and star knots. One last thing I just want to talk about, and then I'll let you go, because I know I've been talking your ear off. On a Thursday night, you've got work in the morning, and I've got work in the morning, and I will just say, have you heard of this game, Starfield? Has anyone heard of this game? This is the new Bethesda game, and if you know, of course, Bethesda, famous for Skyrim, you know, the Elder Scrolls open world games, and the Fallout series, the open world Fallout. I love Fallout 4. So buggy I can't play it anymore, which is really breaking my heart. But we have this new game, Starfield. The release date has been pushed back to sometime this year, and I got to tell you, like, look at Get out of here, Jeff Loveness. Starfield. I just want to see just on the main site, it's going to be an open world space opera game. And if you have looked at the title of this channel recently, you know I love starships. Do I get to have my own starship in Starfield? Do I get to have my own starship? Can I please? Can I go anywhere I want? That would be so cool. It looks like they've got their heart in the right place with this. I will say that. I mean, this looks like, ooh, that's like a cool looking plausible space station. And that looks like kind of a real Earth. I mean, I know it's just marketing stuff, but it does show that they've got an almost NASA feel to this, which kind of is cool. Will the game be any good? I got no idea. I haven't really been following this one, but I just saw that they got pushed back. This is ugly as hell. What is up with this? You know what? I think they're doing a kind of retro futuristic thing. Like this is how it would look in the 70s, but I'm not wild about that. But anyway, yeah, so it's an open world space travel game. Now here's the problem though. It's Bethesda and they are a bit unreliable and everybody tries this, No Man's Sky tried this and it failed for a long time. Now No Man's Sky is doing well because they stayed committed and they developed a pretty good game. Mass Effect Andromeda tried to kind of do an open world-ish, and it was good. It had promise. I enjoyed a lot of Mass Effect Andromeda, but it did not achieve what it was. Its reach exceeded its grasp, I'm sorry to say. So I'm curious if they could pull it. I tried Outer Worlds. I hated it. I hated Outer Worlds, and it looked like it should have been good. So I have never, to this day, found a true open world space game that worked. And I'm excited for this, though. I'll give it a shot. I'll give it a play. If I get to create a character and explore and, there's a cool class system a la Skyrim or Fallout, I'm into it. I enjoy it. But here's the thing, though. I want a good story. It's got to have a good story, and there's got to be enough story, because I don't like open world games where it's all fetch quests. It's just really boring, and that's part of what Andromeda suffered from. Actually, no, Andromeda was pretty balanced. I actually enjoyed a lot of the fetch quests, but Dragon Age Inquisition, really, the fetch quests they grind you down, man. It's just, there's not enough payoff for too many fetch quests, so if that's what it is, it won't be good. So, what Polosurf says, but Starfield sure is exciting. Oh, I hate them ever since, meaning Bethesda, but Starfield sure is exciting. They got their Skyrim money and unbound possibilities. So what else could you possibly need? They've gone really online with all their stuff, and it's really depressing because it's like they put all their energy now into Elder Scrolls Online and Fallout 76. And Fallout 76, I have tried. with that game. I can't get into it. The world is off to me. It doesn't feel like a Fallout world to me. They've got this John Denver country roads, Appalachian, mountains. And the problem is I don't see any damage. I don't see any destruction from nukes. What I see is a beautiful verdant forest and lots of good old down-home Southern hospitality. And that to me is great, but that is not Fallout. And all this stuff about you can build your own campsite with a banjo and a shed, and you can put up all your hillbilly signs. And I am a redneck, so I love all that. I mean, I was born redneck. I have been reformed, but no, I'm just kidding. Anyway, I like all that stuff, but that's not Fallout. So I don't understand what they're going for with Fallout 76, and I can't get into it. I have no fun exploring that world. The plots aren't interesting. And I know it was even worse. I wouldn't even play it when there were no NPCs. So, and I just don't get this. Maybe I just don't understand how to interact with players online, but nobody ever wants to treat it like a role-playing game, Nobody ever wants to interact with you in the world. They're like, oh, they pop in, they look at you for a second, and you're like, oh, let me find my wave thing. Let me find that. Or let me send them a chat real quick. And they look at you, and then they flit over here to the bar and they pick up something, and then they left the world. And I'm like, oh, I was going to start a party or something. Oh, shucks. Well, gosh darn it, fellas. Well, I was going to play. I was going to start a conversation, you know? I thought we're in this game world together. I'm like Butters in an MMO. I really am. I am Butters when I'm in an MMO game. Nobody wants to play with me. I don't understand how to interact with anyone. And everyone just leaves me behind, and I'm like, well, all right, I guess I'll go build a campsite then. I'll just go build a campsite, and maybe someone they'll like my banjo, and they'll come over and play with me. It's like, I can't. No, that's not what happened. So I hate Fallout 76. I hate it, and I hate Skyrim, or not Skyrim. I love Skyrim. The Elder Scrolls Adventure. I tried that one, and it's, you know what? There is only one reason I tried it. And it's because Stros Mackay, the Hammerfell Island, was in it. And I remember I played the game Redguard, which was Elder Scrolls Adventures. It was basically an Elder Scrolls platformer years ago for the PC. And this was like a late 90s game. That's how old this game was. And in the game, it's an open world in Stros Mackay, which was a big deal back then because open world was very rare in that era. And so this little island was an open world, but it was more of an adventure platformer. And I loved it. And so the idea of getting to see Stros Mackay again was a cool idea. And it was cool. I went in, and the first quest I got bored the hell out of me. And they didn't even give you dialogue options. It was like, literally the dialogue options in Elder Scrolls Online is, please go do this quest for me. And you click it, and it's like, accept quest. Okay, accept quest. Return to me when quest completed. And I'm like, oh, fuck this. This isn't fun. I like moral conundrums. I like choices. I like, do I save this character who might betray me or leave him to die because it's what he deserves? Like, that's what I like. So that's what Bethesda wants to spend all their time on now. They want to do all these dumb MMOs, and I just have to be in there like Butters where no one will play with me. And so they won't work on Skyrim anymore. They won't do another Elder Scrolls. They won't do another Fallout for me. They just leave me on red with Fallout 4. They just leave me on red. And I'm like, hey, guys, well, gee golly, fellas, I'm playing Fallout 4 and I'm really liking it at all. But unfortunately, whenever I go down to Boston proper, the game crashes on me. And gosh, I sure do like your game, but it's just no fun. And I get crickets, and they just don't care. They just don't care at all. So, MMOs, screw it. I would love to play 75 with you. Is that a typo or a deliberate typo? You're like, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'll go to the Microsoft store right now, and I'll download Fallout 75, and I'm looking for it. I'm like, gosh, I can't find it. Where is it? He said he would play it with me. Have you ever played Fallout 2? I never played the old school ones. The first one I played was Fallout 3. I knew of the original ones because a friend of mine played them. I just never got them because, I was always behind on technology, because my parents wouldn't let me have a Nintendo until finally years and years went by and I talked them into it. I was just that kid, But anyway, I knew of Fallout 1 and 2, never played them. I've seen footage of them and they look pretty interesting. So they did I don't have Steam right now. I don't have a computer that's a gaming computer, so I will plan on getting a Meta PC eventually. So no, I haven't played Fallout 2. It's the best one. It probably is. Do they take the world more seriously in the first two? That's because my feeling is the world became a bit of a joke in Fallout 3 and beyond because they really leaned into this idea of the parody of the 50s culture. I play it for a stream. I will think about that. I do have a capture card. We'll see what we see. Fallout 2 and 1 seem more gritty to me, and I like that. And Fallout 3 was pretty gritty, but there's something about the kind of over-the-top 50s era world that sometimes I don't like. Sometimes I like it. Sometimes I really do like it, but sometimes I don't like it because sometimes I just want. But I think what makes Fallout such a great series actually, though, is that it's a little bit fantastical. There's super mutants, and there's there's a gallows humor to it that I think is very smart because it's so dark. If it were real, I've actually played. Have you ever played the game? It's the Russian post-apocalyptic game where it's like a first-person shooter. and it's based on that Russian novel about living in the tunnels after a nuclear war, and it's super dark. And it's like, that's a real post-apocalyptic nuclear Fallout story. What's interesting about Fallout is it's a little bit more of a lighter. It's not that it's a lighter tone, it's that they use gallows humor to lighten it. And I think that's very smart. And I enjoy, and it's fun to, it's just kind of fun to play super mutants. And dude, Far Harbor, I love Far Harbor. I'm kind of obsessed with New England for some reason. So don't ask me why. But I feel like in a past life, I was like a Maine fisherman. I seriously think that, maybe not. You know what? I think I was in a past life. I think I was a New England whaler in like the 1800s. I just suspect that, which is probably why I have such a. I really hate the idea of whales being hunted to extinction. I'm probably making up for something. Anyway, I love Far Harbor. There was not enough Far Harbor for me. It was like I went through all the storylines and all the side quests in Far Harbor, and I wanted more. I was like, damn it. I want to do more for the Islanders. I want another reason to go trudging into that mist. Metro, that's it. Thank you. Thank you, Polasurf. That's what I'm talking about. Metro was the Russian game. It's a post-nuclear apocalypse, and it's dark as hell. And I actually didn't play much of the game. I actually started reading the novel, and the novel's pretty good. Let me tell you something. It does not meet the diversity quota when it comes to gender. It's like there's not one female in that whole story. It's unbelievable. But anyway, I'm probably wrong about that. But which is not a complaint, by the way. It's a great story. The story is brutal. It's a brutal story. It's like we are survivors in a subway, and the world is an irradiated, poisonous hell. And it's like it's dismal. It is dismal. And as only a Russian could write, as only a Russian could envision their future. Hand it to the Russians. They don't fuck around. Or maybe they do, given recent events, but not the Russian people, of course. Yeah. Well, maybe. My computer is shit for games right now. I won't lie. I'm a Mac guy. I got sucked into the Mac ecosystem. Don't judge me too harshly. I was a different guy back then, I was all about the, I wanted to be the guy in Starbucks with the MacBook on my knee. No, I'm just kidding. It wasn't that bad, but close. I got into, how I got into Macs? I'll tell you exactly. I never would have gotten into Macs. Rush Limbaugh is how I got into Macs. I used to listen to Rush Limbaugh, and he would always talk about how much he loved iPhones, he loved iPads, he loved everything Apple. He was a huge Apple fan. And whenever he would talk about Apple products, he made it sound so fun and interesting. I was like, that just sounds cool. And so on a lark, I thought I literally was deciding between a Toshiba. I just needed a computer for writing that was dirt cheap. That's all I cared about. And I just wanted it to be simple because my current computer at the time was awful, and it was hot on my lap, and the battery died every 10 minutes. I hated it. And so I just wanted a cheap, light, simple computer. And I'm at the Best Buy, and I'm looking at the Toshiba. What the hell was that thing where it was like you could flip the screen or whatever? I don't remember. And then I see the MacBook, and it looks so sleek, and then I remembered all those fun things that Rush would say about it, and I was like, oh, you know what? I'm going to give the MacBook a try. And I will say this: I don't get what Mac users see in the interface, why they think it's so great. To me, it's just another system. Like, I could do Windows, I could do iOS. They're the same to me. Different things, same shit, different day. I really see. There is nothing, it's a total wash for me in terms of, yes, there's things Mac does better than Windows, but there's things Windows does better than Mac. So it's a complete wash for me. I don't in any way see why people think iOS is superior or inferior, frankly, because it's kind of neither to me. But the hardware is not well suited for gaming on the PC. You're way sure your PC's worse. I like the MacBook. It's reliable. This is what I will say for Apple products. It's actually not the software I think is great, because everyone always just gushes over the software. Oh, the software is so good. It's so easy to find everything. I've never had a harder time finding things than in a Mac. I hate it. Windows was simple. It was a Russian stacking doll system of files. That's easy to understand. I don't know what the hell Mac is doing. Mac makes you search for everything like an idiot. Siri, can you please find this for me? Thank you, because I couldn't have found it. I can't make heads or tails of this file system. But what I do like about Macs is the hardware. The hardware, it's like you can drop it down a staircase and it will still work tomorrow. And it's simple, and it's elegant, it's light, and it just works. Like Apple products they're durable. They really are. They're just durable products. And I enjoy that a heck, because I have dropped things, Apple products, in ways that no piece of technology had any earthly right to survive. And these products have survived. So they're not indestructible. Like John Wick, they can take a beating, but they are not unkillable. But they certainly are not fragile either, and I appreciate that. So, and then the virus thing, that might be an advantage. I never had much problem with viruses on Windows either, because I understood how to guard against them. But all right, dear sailors and star nuts. Well, we've laughed, we've cried, and we have crowed and danced on the grave of Disney. I am so over the moon that Quantumania failed. I did not think it would. I thought Quantumania was going to eke out that little mediocre performance. Suck it, Disney. With greatest respect to who are the other, like a Shakespearean play, we have just left the stage strewn with bodies. Bob Iger, Disney, Quantumania, and Jeff Loveness. Oh, the poor guy whining about his bad reviews. Oh, that's so... And lest we not forget poor Mark Guggenheim, whose phone is not ringing off the hook. Swords and Starships salutes you, sir. We salute you. So... All right, sailors and starnuts, thank you for joining me tonight. This is Swords and Starships. Please do like and subscribe. And if you'd like to support the channel, locals, swordsandstarships.locals.com. So, and until next time, dear sailors and starnuts, this is Captain Garrett saying,